Yo guys, Theo here on Common Sense. Welcome to the first episode of Human Beings, a podcast slash interview show that I'll be doing. So it's called Human Beings because I am very interested in distinct individuals. I don't just care about topics and facts. I care about the person that knows about those things, where they come from and where they're about. So depending on the guest, I'm sure it's going to vary how much we focus on the person and just the things they are about. Today's guest, my first guest, is Geoffrey Verity Schofield, someone that there's a lot of overlap in what we do and talk about. So there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff to get into. So yeah, hello, Jeff. What's up?
Not much. How's it going? I just finished a leg workout, and so got in my post-workout meal and ready to talk about training.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I trained legs today too. I saw you did some rack pulls.
Yep.
Do you think?
So, almost like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you think that's a leg movement?
No, it's for me, it's more back than hamstrings or glutes. It's a little bit, but it kind of depends on how you do it. That's why when people are like, "You're doing it wrong," well, if you don't know someone's goals, how do you know if they're doing it wrong? So it's not really specifically a hamstring movement. If I wanted to train my hamstrings, I ironically would do a back extension more because it's going to hit a lot more hamstrings, even if it's called a back extension. It's kind of a silly name because it's focused more on the hips and the hamstrings and glutes compared to the erectors. But yeah, for me, if I do a rack pull above the knees or from the knees or below the knees, I'm getting a lot of sort of shoulders forward and a lot of this type of action. And so, yeah, it's at least as much back as hamstrings. And I think if you want to train the hamstrings, there's probably many, many other better movements.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not what I'm thinking when I see you do those. Yeah, he's totally hitting hams right now. Funny, I want to get into all of that immediately, but let's get to those things later. So Geoffrey is a natural bodybuilder, a YouTuber, a coach, a teacher, and an author. Is there anything I missed there that you'd like to add?
Husband, I gotta add that one. Otherwise, my wife will kill me. So yeah, that's a big one. But those are the sort of professional ones.
Yeah, no, but I like that you add a husband. It's important. It's an important prefix. But yeah, like I'm gonna present you a little bit more too. But if you just want to tell us who you are and what you're about, how you would present yourself.
Yeah, so I guess I'm sort of a generalist with a little bit of a specificity in terms of both content and my own personal interest in hypertrophy training. So roughly speaking, bodybuilding style of training. So a little bit more exercise variety, a little bit more focus on a variety of rep ranges. So different movements, trying to build up muscle. And that's been my main focus over the past, I would say, 5 or so years. And that has been sort of what most people are interested in when they seek out my content. And perhaps at some point I'll pivot goals, maybe strength, maybe endurance or hybrid training or MMA or something else. But for now, I'm pretty much all in on hypertrophy, and I've been all in for a number of years now. So that's sort of my main focus. And when you're a content creator, often your main focus tends to be what you're interested in and excited about. And so that tends to be the kind of content that you make. And so people find that content, and then it can almost be difficult to change the content you make at a certain point because people expect certain style of content. And then when you change it, people are like, what is this? This is not what I signed up for. Well, people change and people evolve. And I've seen a number of content creators where they almost get trapped in their own, I can only talk about this kind of thing. Yeah. And so it'll probably be a gradual shift at some point into other goals. Perhaps hypertrophy slows down, and it will at some point. But for now, yeah, all hypertrophy.
The pesky natural limit is right around the corner.
It's somewhere, yeah. I don't know. We'll see where it is.
Yeah, no, but that's interesting. I want to ask you about the YouTube and content creation side of things too, because I'm someone that I've been doing content for a while, but it was just in April, my channel kind of blew up. Old video went viral. Of course, a video that's not my typical video, you know, that contains women in the title. And to me, I'm not a pickup artist guy. I'm not going to talk about those things, but it's more like an angle for me because I know people for whatever reason, a woman, I click, you know, but I don't feel trapped yet, but I can definitely see that, okay, I get super rewarded by the algorithm when I do that. So I try to, you know, keep that balance between doing what works in that way, but staying true to what I want to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Because I know YouTubers who for years they went down the algorithm rewards this, so I'm going to make this.
Mm.
But it's so easy to get burned out. And
Yeah. You know, many of
it's
us,
where,
I'm going to ask you
go
about
ahead.
that. Many of us, we started doing videos about something like we're passionate about, like I want to tell people about this. And suddenly
Yeah.
it's more like, oh, what do people want to know instead, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You're trying to reverse engineer. And then at a certain point, some content creators go to the mindset of what can make me money, then I'm going to make a
Mm,
video about that. So I've
mm,
seen definitely some bigger content creators where, oh, they happen to be making a video on jumping rope
mm.
at the same moment. Oh, here's this product placement for monetization route pretty aggressively. And, so I think even that can result in burnout. And so I
Mm,
try to it's almost like a triangle where there's content that you want to make, there's content that can help people, and then there's content that people want to click on. Ideally, you want all three of these things. So something
mm,
you're passionate about and you're not going to get burnt out on, something that can actually help people. It's not just self-centered, because I do see some content creators where they only consider themselves when they're making content. And so they're kind of
mm.
talking about their own thing. Like there's no other transfer in terms of value to other people. Like it's almost like if you go to a class and your teacher is talking about their day and their experiences, and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
that's cool, but like I'm here to learn. Like, what does this have to do? So you
Mm,
kind of have to have that triangle of content for you, content for other people, and then you have to find a way to make it interesting enough, you know,
mm.
hot chicken the thumb or whatever, to get people to click, because it doesn't matter if it's good content for you and good content for people. If it's not at a minimum threshold of clickability, YouTube itself does not care. They just don't
Mm.
care about good content. They care
Yeah.
about content people will click on and then keep watching, which isn't
Yeah.
necessarily valuable, but that's just how sort of the system is, unfortunately.
Yeah. You know, one thing about that too is though you say about like the teacher telling the class about their day. The funny thing is that that goes both ways too, right? You notice how some people are
Sure.
really curious about things about you that have nothing to do with what you're about here, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I
for sure. I
noticed
mean,
that.
you'll get, yeah, for sure. You'll get like students asking you questions, or I'll get people asking me almost like really personal questions that
That's what I mean.
I wouldn't even ask to like a friend. It's just there's this parasocial sort of, they've
Yeah,
seen 100 of my videos, and so now it's like they view me as a friend, someone
exactly.
who they're really close to, but then I don't know who they are. And so it's almost
Mm,
like this weird relationship. And so they feel like it's normal to ask something really personal, especially maybe
yeah.
there's a language barrier or a culture barrier. And so I'm
Mm,
like, okay, like that's really forward of you. But for them, it's like normal
mm.
in their mind. So yeah, there's definitely some challenges in terms of content creation for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, I noticed that as I've grown more recently, and it's something to get used to, just the sheer volume of input of all kinds, you know.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone, for sure.
Oh, it's a lot of, I probably have 3, 4, 5,000 people in my DMs.
Mm,
And I don't think the human brain is I don't think it's designed to deal with that much, right?
yeah.
And I'm not even that big of a name. I mean, you look at a Chris Bumstead or something,
Mm,
or an athlete, someone with millions and
Exactly.
tens of millions of followers, you're not going to be able to DM them because they learned years and years ago that they just can't. It's not
Yeah.
social media at a certain
Yeah.
point. It's just sort of media that
Yeah.
feels social. But I mean, to anyone watching this, try DMing your favorite fitness. And I might respond. I don't know. Maybe it depends on what you say, if it's
You're
interesting or
quite
not.
responsive, it seems
But
like.
yeah, I try. I really do my best. But at a certain
Same.
point, the main issue is that if 100 people DM you and you accept them all into your DMs, most people are cool. They're respectful of your time. Like they're
Yes.
understanding. There's like 5 or 10% of people, usually younger, like teenagers, who are just like every day DMing
Yeah.
you, what's the best chest exercise? How's my technique? And you're just like, okay, well, I don't want to like break anyone's heart, right? It puts you in a really weird position because
I know.
you can't really block them. You can't really, you just give short responses and stuff, and then you're already coaching. And so it's like you're spending all day doing this, and then there's some 16-year-old from Bangladesh asking you, and you're like, oh, shit. So I think most people just won't respond because they realize that they just can't. And at a certain point, it just doesn't scale. Yeah.
No, I think you and I are quite alike with that, it's this like wanting to respond, but you notice when you get more, it's exactly what you say. I would say that most people have an idea of like, this is a decent frequency of me asking a little thing here and there, but there's the person here and there that just doesn't see the boundaries whatsoever, just goes on and on and on. And it's not easy because I just like you, I don't want to crush that person. I'm a nice guy, but I feel like I have to at some point at least be like very serious if I'm not to ignore them completely.
Yeah, I heard when I was getting into the fitness industry, I heard some marketing guru, he said something like, oh, you need to provide a lot of value first so that later they convert to paying clients or business people who build the business and they pay for stuff. I haven't really found that to be the case because it's like you help someone for a long time and then you say, oh, by the way, I'm a coach. And they're like, okay, cool. I don't want to coach. I just want to ask you questions all the time about my own personal training. I'm like, all right, well, that didn't work. Whoever that marketer was full of shit. So yeah, it's one of those things where you have to set boundaries, and sometimes someone will ask me a question I know is in my book. And sometimes they've been DMing me for years. And I realize like they haven't even gotten the book that I wrote. They just decided to go right to the source. And then it's like a little bit, oh, it's in my book. And they're like, no, I don't really like reading ebooks. I would rather just, DM you. And so, yeah, I totally get why most people won't respond. And I used to look down on those people. I used to say like, oh, these are the people supporting you. You can't even like respond to them. But man, I get it. I totally get it. Just because at a certain point, you can't even like make videos because you're too busy helping people for free. And it's like, what, even if you look at it from a greater good perspective, what's going to be more beneficial for the world? Like making a video that a lot of people can enjoy, or, helping this one person on their squat technique or something.
Exactly. I like that you have to go back to that too, kind of, like, how do I help people the most? Like me saying no to this person is actually most helpful to everyone. I think like that
it's
too.
Tough to do.
Yeah.
It's tough to do because I was always just a people pleaser. Even as a teacher in a Chinese school, an English teacher, the staff would ask me to do something totally unreasonable. Oh, you're going to sing a song in Chinese tomorrow. My first year of teaching, I don't speak any Chinese. And they're just like, hear the lyrics, go, like, you're going to have fun on stage tomorrow. We should have told you 2 weeks ago, but like, I forgot. And, the normal response is, no, that's ridiculous. I'm not doing that. But like, when you're younger and you haven't really developed that thicker skin and that ability to say, hey, no, I can't do that. That's not reasonable. Yeah, you do it. And I think you go through enough of those experiences where afterwards you're like, I should have just said no. That was not reasonable. And then eventually I would say probably in my late 20s, early 30s, that's where I was like, okay, I developed the ability to say no, no.
Yeah.
And you can be polite, you can be respectful, but I think you have to be firm at a certain
Mm.
point to get the message.
Yeah. 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 Oh, that's really interesting to hear. You know, the way I see it is with these things, like a thing like people pleasing, it's like levels to it, you know, because I'm someone, maybe you look into that afterwards, but I had like a big crash in life, like panic attacks. I went through for months facing that. And I just came out a very transformed person after that entire experience. So things like having boundaries, saying no to people, that just came, it's like I did so much work at once, but then later on, I've had to notice in some situations that, shit, I still struggle a bit with feeling as if I need to take responsibility for this person and say yes and all of that. So now that's interesting to hear. I could get so much into this. So we already dealt with some of the YouTube stuff, like what it's like right now, but I want to get to also how you got into that. But first, one question I like to ask people is kind of, what is your origin story? Because I have a very clear origin story. And look, if there's not too much to say from when you were younger, you could do the kind of abridged version. But I would just, because now you're in China and you have a wife there and you do the fitness YouTube stuff, but kind of like, how did you end up there? Where did Geoffrey start before then?
Yeah, so I guess I started at least like my fitness-ish journey as a runner when I was 15, and it wasn't it wasn't chosen for me, but I didn't really choose it. It was just sort of my parents, I think, encouraged me to do something, to pick like some physical activity. And I
Mm,
was always pretty physically active growing up. Um, but I'm always kind of curious about how people develop a passion for something.
mm,
And do you choose it, or does it choose you, or is it the environment, or is it your proclivity to something? Because
mm,
some people just seem to really sink their teeth into various activities, and I've always kind of been interested in why, because it is
mm,
difficult to break down. Oh, this person got really interested into Dungeons and Dragons. This person got really into party culture. This person
mm,
got really into bodybuilding or distance
mm,
running or something else. And so it's this weird amalgamation of something maybe you're good at, you're better than other people, or you just enjoy it. It has some kind of interesting challenge to it, or maybe you have a friend who's into it as well, and they sort of pull you into it.
mm,
And or maybe there's a mentor who, some kind of teacher or someone who's a little bit older than you, or a parent who says that, hey, you should do this or try this, and they take you under their wing. But I don't really remember any external pressure beyond maybe my parents just saying, "Hey, oh, try this," and
mm,
so I kind of wonder sometimes, could it have been anything, right? Like,
mm,
what could it have? Was it necessarily that was destiny, or could it have been any other activity that I got really into?
mm.
Sometimes I think the hyper obsessive and focused male mind, it just latches onto something, and then it's like, whoa, here we go. Then
Yeah.
5 or 10 years later, you get spat out the back, and you're like, oh shit, what happened? Where did all that time go? And so yeah, I think every 5 to 10 years there's something new, right? Whether it
Mm,
was distance running, or whether it's gaming, or whether it's learning Chinese, or whether it's being a better teacher, or whether it's YouTube, or whether it's bodybuilding training. Like there's sort
mm,
of this phasic thing where there's one thing that's this hyper focus, and then there's another wave, there's a new thing, and then oh, there's something else. And so
mm.
I see that in a lot of people,
Yeah.
and I think learning how to control that and direct that energy is something best to learn early in
Mm,
life. Because if you figure that out at 40 or 45, yeah, you've lost a lot of time.
mm.
But if you figure it out early and you can kind of direct that energy, yeah, it could be
Yeah.
useful for sure.
Sure. But so I just want, you don't have to go deep into it, but I kind of like, you're born, you live with both your parents, you have any siblings, just stuff like that.
So yeah, both parents. Wonderful parents. They gave me everything I needed, but not everything I wanted, which I think is the best possible
Yeah.
combination, where you have the basic necessities, but you don't have everything all the time whenever you want, and you
Mm.
don't develop a spoiled nature or bad habits.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, fantastic parents. One younger brother
I
who now
thought
lives
so.
over in Australia. I went to his wedding, I think in October, and that
Hmm.
was amazing. That was awesome.
Mm.
And so, yeah, we're both on the other side, the other side of the world,
Yeah.
from our parents. So unfortunately we don't get to see them super often.
Mm.
Um, and then yeah,
No, sure. No, I was sitting here. Well, he's going to tell me about the younger sibling, because I noticed that with a lot of people that I connect with, I have a younger brother, an autistic brother. So, I had to really be a big brother, and I just noticed that a lot with people I like to
right.
follow, and that they kind of early had to a little bit take responsibility for someone else, because you kind of have that when you're the older sibling, right? So I'm just always curious to see if like my prediction was true. But yeah,
Yeah.
I know, of course, you started with running. And so what I kind of want to know is like, when do you start transition more into hypertrophy training? And also when and how did the whole move to China happen?
I moved to China in 2011, I think,
Okay.
to
Mm.
be an English teacher. I had a friend who had come here the year before, and she really enjoyed the teaching program. And then I kind of got it was easy. It was really easy. You work
Mm.
maybe 15 or 20 hours a week, maybe 1 to 2, perhaps 3 lessons a day, or maybe you have 6 lessons on one day and then the other days are really, really easy. But it was roughly like 12 to 15 lessons per week.
Mm.
And it was a pretty easy job overall. Everyone's super nice. Kids are easy to teach. Sometimes I see like videos of Western classrooms where the kids are acting up and stuff. Really,
Mm.
none of that. Like discipline is pretty much a lockdown. Very
Mm.
little shenanigans going on. So it was a very
Mm.
easy job. I enjoyed it. I liked it, but I wouldn't say that I loved it. There are some teachers who have a passion for teaching. Like they're very, very into teaching
Mm.
English or teaching math. And you can tell
Mm.
like those are the best teachers, the ones who don't just care about the subject, but they care about the process of teaching and of
Yeah,
conveying information.
sure.
Um, I would say that I liked it, but I never really had as much of a passion as some other teachers, I could tell.
Mm.
And I did a good job. I wouldn't say I did a great job. I
Mm.
was good at it, better than average, but not. I mean, you see some teachers and they have just so many details in their lessons and they plan everything out for hours and
Mm.
hours and hours. For me, it was more than just show up, but it was not something that I was really obsessing over to the point of doing like the best possible job. And then you
Sure.
get it like the second year and the third year and the fourth year and the fifth year, and kind of just you get trapped in the job that's too easy but that you don't really love, and it's just
Mm.
comfortable and you get
Yeah.
complacent. But then, so by year 4 or 5, I knew that I wanted to make a change, but sometimes it's tough to get out of that warm bed in the winter. It's
Yeah.
just comfortable in there, and there's some cool stuff outside, and you want to maybe go try some of that stuff out there, but you're just so comfortable under those covers.
Mm.
And so I think it probably took I think my 7th year was the year that I switched.
Mm.
Um, and I probably should have switched sooner, but again, it's one of those things where comfort is the enemy of gains in
Mm.
in a lot of different ways.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I started
100%.
lifting, and I started lifting when I was 25.
Mm.
So that was
And
like
are you
2000.
35 today?
Yep, 30.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Mm. Yeah, sure. And I just want to say though, because you talk about, I guess you talk about the teacher job, that I feel like I'm not like 100% committed, like love teaching like that. But honestly, my impression when I look, I see a YouTube video of yours here and there, but I mostly follow your Instagram. And to me, you're teaching there all the time, you know, and you
Yeah.
seem very, very passionate about it. And I that's how I see myself in you a lot in that way, that like, oh, I just did this thing, you know, I just got to share it right now, you know.
Yeah.
So to me, you're definitely a teacher, is what I'm saying. But maybe that
Yeah,
first
it
job
helped.
was, mm,
Yeah. I think it helped me, and there's a difference between knowing something and being able to teach something. And there's this
yeah,
sort of saying of, oh, if you can't do, then teach.
yeah,
And I don't think that's completely fair. I think it's true in some cases.
mm,
There is that high school basketball teacher who, yeah, if he could go into the NBA, he would have, but he just
mm,
wasn't quite good enough. So he became, a teacher instead. I think there's a grain of truth to that, but there's also the opposite. There's also the people who they can do, but they can't teach. And I don't
100%.
hear that talked about enough where, yeah, there are some professional athletes who I hear them try to convey what they're doing and they just don't,
Mm,
they can't visualize it, they can't express it, they can't share it and teach it to other people. And it's not that they can't do it, they absolutely can do it, but they haven't internalized that process enough to be able to externalize it and to get other
yeah,
people to understand how their body is doing that, or how
mm,
something works. And I think in some ways, the people who, whether it's bodybuilding or some other sport, the people who are the best at something, they went right from doing something to it being unconscious competence. So they
yeah,
never had to
exactly.
think about it. They went right to like, oh, this is how I swing a golf club. Oh, the
Mm,
ball went exactly where I wanted it to go.
mm,
And then they try to teach someone else, and they're like, okay, so just hit the ball and then hit it over there.
yeah,
And the person's like, trying.
yeah.
Any more details for me, bro? And
You
they
know,
just never had to go into those details because it was all just instinct. Yeah.
mm. You know, that's so funny to me that you bring up the example of golf, because I play a little golf. Like, I'm not good at it, but I played for a long time. And so someone came with us, you know, we're at the driving range, and someone came with us that had never played golf. And I noticed how interested I was in immediately, like, what thing can I say that makes it click for him
Yeah.
so he hits the ball? I really, I love that, seeing like, what can I do that helps the person? You know, I talk a lot about, you know, the saying, you can't, you can bring a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. And I've thought
Yeah.
of it as, yeah, but I can get better at bringing it closer to the water and show how tasty the water is and that kind of thing, you know. So I noticed that gets me going a lot. Like, okay, he doesn't quite know this. Like, what can I do so he knows it better?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And that's such a satisfying moment when someone didn't get something and then you do
Mm,
something and now they get it. And they're like,
yeah.
oh, like that's how something works, right? Like, oh,
Yes.
like if I move this way, like that feels
Mm,
different. Yeah, that's a really satisfying thing. And I think that's why a lot of teachers teach, just because
mm.
those moments, which don't always happen. Sometimes you got to sort of figure out exactly what to
Yeah, yeah,
say.
of
But yeah, when
course.
they do happen, yeah, very, very, very motivational, and that's what keeps you going for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But so, okay, let's talk about how you got into lifting, how that started.
So I think I was just kind of burnt out on running. I'd been doing it from when I was 15 all the way up to 25 ish.
Mm,
And I had had a lot of injuries, a lot of imbalances in my hips and just sort of how my legs moved,
mm,
which I think were probably genetic. Um, Sometimes running on a cambered roads are naturally sloped to the
mm.
side so that the water runs down
Yeah.
to the sides and doesn't just stay in the middle. So if you look at most roads, there's at least a gentle camber. And if you're always running on one side road, you're essentially, it's almost like a deficit on one side. So it's easy to sort of have your body conform to that. And you're supposed to always run on the left side so that you're facing traffic and you can see the cars that might be going close to you. Running with the traffic, it's a lot easier to get just blindsided because you're not looking backwards. And also on tracks, you almost always run counterclockwise. So if you look at any track meet, I don't know why they do this, it's just sort of the culture of track and field. You always run the same direction. And so the turns are a little bit, they're going to be also uneven in some way, because especially when you're running quickly, man, if you look at the 200 meters, you look at Usain Bolt barreling around the curve, he's not perfectly upright. You have to lean into the curve. The faster you're going, the more you have to lean. I mean, if you could run twice as fast, you would have to lean even more. So if you look at someone run slowly, just jogging around the curve, there's no impact. But when you're really sprinting, you have to lean into that curve, which can also create imbalances. So if you look at most middle distance runners or distance runners, they do have some imbalances, and it's almost like a functional imbalance. It makes you better, of course, at sports. So, but it can result in injuries in terms of overuse, or like the Achilles, or into like the fascia of the feet. Iliotibial band is a big one as well, just because not everything is perfectly aligned, which is good in the short term, but long term can sometimes catch up to you. So I had a lot of injuries, and I was kind of just tired of it, I guess. Like we go back to this sort of, really interested in something. And then, I'm frustrated. Sometimes you get through that.
You were very into running, like you really enjoyed it for a while.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I would say it was almost like young love. Like when you have young love, it's like blind and hopeful, and you're not really thinking, and you're just really interested in this. But then like after that first time, the second and the third and the fourth time, it's like, it's different. It's not quite as young and dumb and just not considering the future. It's not as in the moment, probably because you've had that before. So lifting was more, I guess, methodical, maybe a little bit more intelligent to a certain extent. Although when you're getting into something and you don't know very much about it, you can read as much as you want about it, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be useful. And a lot of what I read was actually not useful. It was actually counterproductive. And I think I made a lot of mistakes, but it's really rare to meet a lifter who didn't make a lot of mistakes.
Of course, you have to on the way. Yeah. That's how you learn.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's just, I do meet a lot of people where maybe it's so many YouTube videos about like the perfect leg workout or the optimal way to make gains. And people ask me, how much muscle can I gain this year?
Yeah.
There's no, how would you know? You can't, you would need some kind of biological scan, and you can maybe give an estimation. It's your second year of lifting, 5 to 10 pounds, maybe like somewhere in there, probably.
Yeah.
But maybe you have a really good second year and you didn't have a great first year, and you missed out a lot of your newbie gains, and you can make those up in the second year. Or maybe you really nailed things in the first year, and now your situation is not as good, and so you're not going to make as many gains. So it's a lot of people want to know the outcome before they even get in the arena, which to me is a wild thing, because you learn the most when you're in there and you're being observant, and you're actually in combat with the weights, if you will.
Yes.
And you're going to make mistakes. You want to avoid the big mistakes. You want to avoid like, I ripped this muscle, or I tore this tendon, or I had some kind of catastrophic thing that sets you back either a very long time or permanently. But I think most beginners, they don't get injured that much. And if they do, it's something really minor. And so, I would say for most beginners, you don't have to be super worried about injury. That's another thing I see, like, don't do this exercise. The stimulus to fatigue ratio is really bad.
Yeah.
Never do that. Well, you have to manage your risk, but if the risk is already low, you don't need to be hype fixated on it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. And let's get into more of the lifting stuff in detail like that in a bit. But I just want to ask, like, how you started the YouTube thing, because that's very interesting to me personally too. Like, what made you decide to do that, and what did, like, you know, the initial growth look like? Was there anything that made it take off, like a video going viral or something like that? Just give us the story there.
Yeah, I wouldn't say any particular video went viral. I started in actually September 2019, and the video quality is very, very low. Yeah, so earlier than a lot of people realize. And my first few videos did very, very badly. The sound was really was awful. There was just this reverb microphone that they use in like KTVs here. So it would be this sort of dancing music that echoed a lot. It was just not good. And I think I got maybe 5 views per video or something. And I was like, all right, this is not working very well. And I started writing on Quora instead. And so it's a sort of question and answer site, which kind of is a good thing if you're a teacher. Because if you don't have a question when you're a teacher, it's a little bit difficult to I guess, structure your content because you don't know how to, what do people need to know? I have no idea. But with Quora, I had a question. Oh, like I actually know a lot about this. Like, and so I wrote, I think I probably have like 3,000-ish answers on Quora. And that was mostly in late 2019. You know, I'd answer like 20, 30 questions a day, basically all day. And this was not a job. This was not paid for, but I also figured, you know, I'm getting many millions of views. And who knows how much a view is worth on Quora or if these were even real. But I could tell that like there's actually some momentum here. I was enjoying it. I had learned a lot about training and now I could actually share it. And so that felt productive, even if I wasn't getting paid for it. And then I restarted it. I restarted YouTube in, I think, February 2020. And at this point, I decided to link my YouTube and Instagram under my Quora answers.
Smart.
At one point, I was just like, all right, this is silly. I'm not growing any followers or anything, so I'm just going to link my pages at the bottom of the Quora thing. They're not paying me. I'm producing a ridiculous amount of content for them. At one point, I was the #1 writer in fitness and health and all these other categories, more than the number 2 through 10 writers combined.
Wow.
So I was like 10 times as much as anyone else. And so I just felt like, okay, well, I've given a lot to this website for many, many months. They haven't given me a dime. And so I just linked my YouTube and Instagram there. And I figured if they banned me or blocked me or whatever, like, all right, that's a poor decision on their part, but you know, so be it. And so that started to get people to trickle in. I started making videos. The initial videos, which are still up, they weren't good, but they also weren't terrible. I did less voiceovers and more just direct to the camera type of work. And YouTubing is definitely a unique skill. Being able to talk to a camera, usually when you're alone, and sound engaging and sound like you're actually talking to someone and make it interesting and be able to have some kind of flow to your thoughts and be able to engage people. Yeah, that's something that is a little bit different than teaching, but teaching still had a pretty good amount of carryover. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just want to, because for me, with the YouTube channel, it's like, you know, I started, when is it? Like also 2019, I think. Yeah. Because, you know, I did this drastic life change. Basically, I went from like being on and off depressed and lost in my life for a long time, hitting this rock bottom, finding a lot of things, but also the training and fitness things as just like, yeah, it changed my life. I never felt so good ever before. So I just got this, like, I just need to share what I've learned because other people need to know. So I started, but it took for me the first 5 years. It was 1,000 subscribers per year gained, and then I had
Yeah.
this old video picked up by the algorithm in April, and I tripled the 5K to 15,000 in like a month or something. So.
Wow.
That's why I'm also a little interested just to know what that looked like for you. But I guess it was kind of slow, but the Quora thing helped kind of get people into YouTube.
Yeah, I've heard that same kind of trajectory a lot where the first, it takes a while for the algorithm to even know you're a thing in a
Yeah.
lot of cases. Not in every case. I mean, you look at someone like Josh Brett, I don't know how many videos he has now, but his first video, I think, was the V-Shred video
Mm-hmm.
that got many, many millions of views. And so some people are just really, really good right away. I mean, his content is ridiculously good. And so he was really, really good right away. But for most people, you kind of have to make content and then see what works and then change things and get better. And then there's the thumbnails, and then there's the titles, which are a huge part of it. There's the intro, like there's that hook, and then there's the rest of the video. And then, so there's a lot that goes into it. I would say that there wasn't any single video that really took off. I will say that I think in June 2020, there was that Athlean-X fake weight
Oh, yeah.
scandal thing.
I remember.
And I made a couple videos, maybe two or three videos on that. And
Mm.
those did not amazing, but they were the first videos that got any traction on the platform.
Mm.
Everything else was just people trickling into Quora and sort of building this little community of people that they didn't find my content through YouTube. They
No, I
found
understand.
me through Quora, and then they sort of transported over. But that was the first time that, oh, the algorithm is a thing. Like, oh, I actually see like new people seeing the video, which was encouraging. Yeah. And then actually also Sean Nalawani gave my channel a shout out when I had like 6,000 or 7,000 ish subscribers. And I think I got 1,000 in a single day, which was pretty wild. Then. So yeah. So big shout out to Sean. Thank you for that. That was incredible. But for the most part, it's been just a very sort of gradual upward slope. And I would say the past year and a half has been slower, but it's been mostly through, it's not the algorithm or anything like that. It's mostly just me putting out less videos and, kind of getting burnt out in 2023. And then, I'll probably be back at some point. And like, for me, I need a big goal to work towards because I'm very sort of dopamine driven, like, seeing that progress, getting better. We're working towards something. So I think 1 million would be something worth going all in for.
Love that.
But at the same time, I know myself well enough that if I get to 1 million, okay, what then? Like 5 million, 10 million, just, and like the things you need to do to grow sometimes are a little bit disgusting in some ways. Like I don't actually like a lot of what you have to do in terms of titles and clickbait and thumbnails, and like every single thumbnail these days, like a shocked face or something. Oh my God, this crazy new study. Oh my God, this study changes everything. It doesn't. So the things you have to do to grow are kind of nasty. And so I have to kind of decide if I want to go down that road and how far.
No, I totally get that. I try to almost play with those things a little bit, that, I super exaggerate the title, but I might even address that in the video, kind of like, this is what works, guys. Like you click when I do this. So but it's also interesting what you say, that when I hit the million, then what? Because it's the hedonic treadmill kind of thing, that I was actually
Exactly.
prepared for it. Like when I had that video go viral, and I just at my level at the time, it's just like it's dopamine is just flowing because I know every day I can expect that bigger numbers, more comments, more like everything, you know. But
Yeah.
I learned this from life at this point that I'm like, this is going to slow down at the point, and it's going to feel like my new normal. And then I'm going to feel as if
Yeah.
I'm not making any progress or something. So because was like prepared for it, I noticed that moment when like, nothing's happening now. And then like, hey, wait, Theo, like a lot is still happening. You've just gotten used to it, kind of, you
Yeah.
know. But I totally see that hitting the
Yeah. I think
million.
you have to separate. It would be
Mm,
cool. Yeah. I think comedian Louis C.K.
mm,
he he went from like selling out arenas and then he got canceled or something. And like you can't be at the very top forever, right? Like
no,
most people have this sort of a few years at the top and then, there's someone else or there's someone new or there's something new. And so I think you have to be, enjoy it when it's there. But yeah, you can't get upset at way down on the other side. It's just normal. It's just part of that process. And so
yeah,
yeah, he says, "Oh, now I don't do arenas anymore. I'm back to where I was. Like I'm doing theaters or I'm doing small shows and like." But he enjoys it. Like he enjoys the process of comedy. So I think having that process oriented approach
oh yeah,
is something that's very very important. Yeah,
oh
whether
yeah,
it's
and
content creation, bodybuilding.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm big on that too. Like I have several videos with pretty much that in the name, like process oriented versus results oriented, and so I think that some things it just is like that. When you're used to something bigger, higher, better, whatever, something less feels it feels less in comparison. But I think for me, for instance,
Yeah.
what I always will love is just training a person. Like I do mostly the online thing now, but I have a few in-person clients that I don't really make much money from or anything, but I do love that. I take it very seriously. So I think that's a good thing to remember. Remember what it was all about from the beginning. Like don't forget the thing you actually enjoy, no matter what on what like level or what I mean.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why, like, I get asked, "Oh, why don't you do steroids?" Like, it's a
Hmm.
weird thing not to do steroids.
Yeah,
And I think one of the reasons is like deep down, I know, like, what's the end game?
yeah,
Where do you go? Like, okay, you do your first cycle. Wow, you gain like all this muscle. Let's do it again. Oh, cool.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
you
yeah.
gain a little bit more muscle, but not as much as the first time because there's still diminishing returns. I got to
Mm,
use more. Oh, now you're even bigger. Like I'm already the biggest guy out here,
yeah,
walking around the street. And then, so like, where do you go? Where do you end? At a certain point,
exactly.
you have to go off. Your doctor says, "Hey, you're gonna die." Like,
Mm,
your blood pressure's through the roof, or your lipids are awful, or whatever. Hey, like, we have to have this conversation, and then you have to downsize.
yeah,
Like, could you ever really enjoy training again? I think if you're process focused and you just enjoy the thing, yeah,
mm,
maybe.
mm,
But at least with natural bodybuilding, yeah, the gains are slower as you go, but they're still gains. You're
yeah,
still growing, into year 12, year 15, even year 20, or maybe even more. Plus, you have your health. Plus, you have, maybe you're not as big,
mm,
but you kind of have to think about, well, why do I want to get that big?
mm,
Why do I need to be 250 pounds and shredded? Oh,
mm.
260, 270. Like what is driving you to be that big? And I think in a lot of cases, it's maybe some not great mental health things. But then also, why do you feel the need to get that big naturally? Like why do you feel the need to still put on muscle naturally as well? So I guess, they're two sides of the same coin. It's just
Sure.
that the enhanced side of the coin has a lot more negative drawbacks
Yeah, yeah.
and you can't do it forever. So you drop back down, I guess, what's the end game? Where do you go?
Mm. No, I completely agree. And of course, there are many reasons to not do steroids. But I think that, like you and me, for instance, we are clearly into this. We like, I want to max out here, but it's kind of like we've chosen this. Like I'm in this natural domain.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you and I, if we're gonna start doing that, we're not just gonna try it a little bit. It's gonna have to be like, okay, now I took that step, kind of like let's just
Yeah.
go all in on it. Because
Right.
that's
It's
kind of
like,
how I feel. That's what people can do whatever they want, of course. But my general message is like, I'm not going to condone it. I'm not going to recommend it. I'm going to suggest that you don't. But
yeah.
for me personally, if I'd like to do that, it's like, because I'm going to be an elite IFBB pro or a power lifter, something like this, because then it all makes
Right.
okay. It's worth it. It's my passion. Okay, I'll do those sacrifices. But just being me, who I am right now, I'm just not seeing the reason to do it. No.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have more respect, and I should probably word this carefully. I
Mm-hmm.
have more respect for the guy who blasts his face off and gets like second or third at the Mr. Olympia. I have more respect for him, and then he dies at 45 or 50. I have more respect for him than someone who like takes them to get beach lean or takes them to
100%.
like have an okay physique or like, oh, like you're no, but no, at that point, why? Yeah, like you could have gotten that naturally anyway. But the guy who's in like really fighting and it's his life and it's his passion and he sacrificed everything, even his life. Like I mean, yeah, I get that. I understand that. It's not for me, but at least you tried to do something great. And I realize this sounds like a motivational steroid kind of thing. It's not like, but I think there's a difference between that, which by the way, very few people should even be doing.
Yeah.
Those who are like taking them recreationally, but they don't know very much about training or diet or nutrition or anything really. And they're just kind of taking it as a shortcut.
Yeah.
That's probably 95% of users.
Yeah.
Those who are making natural gains with steroids. And to me, like that's just lazy.
Yeah.
There's no other way to say it. It's just lazy, short-sighted, and yeah, that kind of thing I really, really don't like. But the guy who's going to the limits of humanity with enhanced, yeah, I guess I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with all of that. And, I think to myself often, there are guys, we talk about who can you tell if someone is natural or not by looking at them. But there are some guys that are on roids that you would never know from just looking at them. And I'm just like, imagine being that guy, it's like no one, you get tons of steroid accusations too, I'm sure. Imagine being the opposite, that you're actually on and no one ever thinks that you are,
A fake, yeah. There's fake natties and then there's fake enhanced guys. Yeah. So that's man, that's gotta be tough taking a whole bunch of drugs and looking really average or like a swimmer build or maybe even do you even lift? I mean, that has gotta be usually it's younger guys who do this, guys who are 16, 17, and 18. It seems to be starting younger and younger, but yeah, that's just not a good path to go down. At the very least, build your base naturally, and then you can just develop until you're 25 or so, maybe even a little bit later. And so most people are starting before that, where it's an impulsive thing. It's I want it now. I want status. I think muscle is really important. I think it'll get me lots of women or lots of money, or I'll be like an influencer. They see their favorite content creator and they think like, I want to do that. But it usually doesn't work out. And so, I would say if you can't build it naturally first, you probably don't have any business trying steroids and thinking that's going to be the key to growth. Yeah, it's not. It's not.
Yeah. No, it seems that's also my thing that can kind of stress me out a bit, like with these young guys hopping on that, well, you don't even know how to train and diet properly, So whatever benefits you get from those are going to be way less than they could be, and you're causing yourself a lot of harm at the same time. So totally, if you're going to do that, like get good at lifting for a few years naturally first, at least.
Yeah, and you look at Ronnie Coleman. He was natural until, and there's a little bit of debate on this, but of course there will be, because it's Ronnie Coleman, and his natural peak is going to be
insane,
way beyond what most people will expect. Yeah. So, but he was natural until he was like somewhere between 27 and 30. Like for sure 27, 28. 29, 30 was like, okay, maybe. But then you look at what happened after. I mean, he got a lot bigger from 30, 31, 32, 33. So, yeah, if you see someone kind of like plateauing and they look super impressive, and then they become the best in the world in a few years, like, yeah, they probably were natural when they were plateauing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the natural limit for some people is just, it almost blows the mind. And a lot of people just don't really realize that you have this bell curve, and that tail end where you have that 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000, 100,000, 1 in a million. You get some really weird, freakish stuff over at that end where, yeah, they're going to look like fake naturals. They're going to look better than 99% of people who took steroids.
Yeah.
Even if they're natural, because their genetics are that good in terms of the shape, the muscle bellies, the small waist, the insertions. And yeah, there's nothing that someone with 50% genetics is going to be able to do, even with steroids, to get that same look. So yeah, the genetics, especially at that really tail end, are super important. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but he still became the best. Even if he waited till he was 30, he still became the best. So when someone says, I want to be an IFBB pro, okay, well, you're 18, you don't have to pop on right away. Like, you can wait and still be really, really good. And your head is probably not in the right spot. So even if you want to be the best enhanced lifter of all time, you don't have to do it right away, especially if you're really young.
Yeah. I think that person, it's not just that they want to be an IFBB pro, they want to be that now, like most guys, how you are when you're 18, you're not going to be like, well, you just lift naturally for 5 years and then hop on and do that for a few years. And then, you don't think like that then, one thing.
5 years is different.
Yeah, no, but let's talk more about genetics in a bit. But just one thing, this thing with steroids, I feel like people forget sometimes that it's not steroids that build muscle. That's the human body. The steroids just enter the human body and kind of modulate that process. But that's my thing sometimes, like. Because many times, I mean, I'm sure you got that too. People ask me if I'm on gear when I am like small, I just had some muscle on my entire frame and I'm lean enough. So there's a little bit of striation here, a vein here or something. And a lot of people are just like, oh, that's what steroids look like. It's like, no, that's what some muscle mass with not too much fat on it looks like.
Yeah, I think people would be surprised. It's not the muscle mass that makes you look like you're on steroids. It's the leanness in a lot of cases.
Yes.
If you're 7, 8, 9% body fat, you don't need that much muscle to look really, really good, especially on social media. Like a lot of people's sort of favorite fitness influencers, they're not nearly as big as people think. It's just that all their pictures are like, and I've done this myself, so it's not like me calling out necessarily other people. But if you're shredded and you have, the right angle and you have all the details with the pump and the lighting, you can see all that separation. And so people should realize what is going on. And I'll get the same, I'll take a hyper optimized sort of side chest or something.
Sure.
And people will be like, oh, steroids, like, why are you lying to people? Oh, you're giving kids hope and you're sack of shit. And then I'll take an unpumped photo or video, fully clothed, me just sort of standing there, and people will be like, well, why should I listen to you? You're not even jacked. Look at this guy. He's way more jacked than you. I'm going to go listen to him. You're never going to grow on social media. And so it's just this weird thing that people don't realize. Exactly. Like, you get the do you even lift, but then you also get the steroid thing. And so yeah, there's this weird gray zone that you could be in where you look impressive enough that people will listen to you, but not so impressive that they assume you're on steroids.
Yeah.
And if you stray out of that zone, first Reddit will call you out because that's like the canary in the coal mine where they're so black pilled that anyone who looks even a little bit too impressive clearly on steroids.
Of course.
And so, yeah, I'm getting, where most of my natty or juice threads nowadays, most people don't think I'm natural. 2-3 years ago, there would be a lot of people saying, no, I think he actually is natural, but I've gotten too big, so I've gotten too far there. On YouTube and Instagram, people are still pretty reasonable, but at a certain point, you're going to get to a level where it's just very few people think you are natural. The only people who will think you're natural are those who are actually involved in either like natural bodybuilding or have achieved a high level themselves. When I look at the best natural pros now, I think, well, yeah, look at the structure, look at the muscle bellies, like everything is proportional, like everything's well developed. He's really jacked, but like that looks like what a top natural physique would look like. Whereas 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, same physique and be like, oh, drugs, steroids, like for sure. Like, look at him. He's too lean. He's too peeled. He's too vascular. He's too something. He's bigger than me. I'm plateaued. I'm not happy. And so, clearly he's doing something nefarious. And so, yeah, there's a lot of it comes down to your own perspective and your own progress and how close you're getting to the physique that you look at.
Yeah. Do you know what annoys me with all of this is that people judge it on like, no, but he weighs this at this height. That's not possible without steroids. And it's kind of like, well, can you listen to the guy and watch what he does and the way he talks about these things? Like, because, to me, for instance, if you were not natural, it's like, what crazy kind of show have you been putting on here? It's like, can't you judge just a person too, and not just go by that amount of striations is not possible, or it's some people have made up their mind that these numbers, this kind of look, are not possible. I won't listen to anything else.
Yeah, no, it's very hard to defend yourself because if you do it too much, then you look defensive and people are like, oh, he's defending himself. Yeah. And it's a weird thing getting fake natural accusations because in some ways it's a compliment because they're saying, oh, you look so good. Like you're so impressive that, hey, like it is a compliment. It is. But they're also calling you a lying sack of shit. Exactly. So there's just like, okay, well, they're calling me a liar, but they're also saying I look good. Oh, what's more important? If it's a stranger on the internet, it's almost more of a compliment because they don't know your character. They haven't actually followed you, they just saw one video and now they think you're not natural and they leave a comment. So it's like, all right, well, it's kind of nice. But if there was like a fellow content creator who said, oh, I think he's a fake natty, especially if they had known me or if they had commented on the channel or if I had talked to them, like if I had DM'd them for several years and then, they said, oh, I think he's a fake natural, that would be more on like they know me and they still think I'm a liar. It would be more on that side of things rather than like, oh, it's a compliment of your physique. So it kind of depends on who it is and where that's coming from. And is it a nobody? Is it someone you know? And so it's kind of a compliment. And then there's also this aspect of feeling bad for them because, okay, well, the natural standards for the best of the best are up here. They think it's down here. And so they're going to limit themselves in terms of what they can do because their head is just not in the right place. And so, yeah, there's a lot of layers to do a fake natty comment. But ultimately, there's not that much you can do to change. You can post your blood work. Oh, it's photoshopped. Oh, it's you were just off cycle or something else. You can post. You can have zero side effects, zero symptoms, like nothing, no gyno, no acne, no bloating, like nothing, reasonable progression. I think I've only convinced a handful of people who initially were like, oh, you're fake natty. And then one guy was like, oh, actually, I looked through your progression and actually I think that's reasonable. I'm sorry. That's the only time I've ever got an apology on the internet. And it felt really good. And Shout
Don't
out to
expect
that guy
those.
for actually being reasonable. Yeah, it's not common. It's not.
Yeah. No, the way I feel about it is kind of the same. Because what I notice is that when someone says, oh, well, no, that's totally believable, that's natural. I'm like, no, wait a minute. You're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to be a little
Yeah,
skeptical.
yeah.
But no, I think what annoys me is one thing if someone just thinks I'm not natural, but that people will go to your comments and write that, like, you should come clean to your audience about the steroids, because it is
Yeah.
attacking your livelihood at that point. Like some people that don't know any better, they didn't, oh, I like this guy, they scroll through the comments and like, aha, okay, I see, that's how it is, and I know I've seen you say that. That's why you can't leave it unanswered. That's why you have to at least say something that.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, you have to get in there. You have to get in there because every time you don't answer something like that, people are like, "Oh, he's not addressing it." Of course, And I know some enhanced content creators who ignore all that. They don't talk about it. They don't mention it. They don't promote it. They just don't talk about it. But they're clearly enhanced, and I think that's probably the way to go if you're enhanced.
Yeah.
Don't detail your cycle. Don't say, "Oh, Monday I take this. Tuesday I no." I think just shutting up about that is probably the best way to go. Transparency is nice in some ways, but there is a cost to excess transparency. And now you're Boston Lloyd, you're injecting stuff in the bathroom on camera, stuff like that. I mean, it's just at a certain point, it's kind of glorifying it. And then even some content creators, they have their discount links or they own companies that sell this shit.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, the conflict of interest is just despicable, especially when your audience is young, which it almost always is. And so, yeah, it's one of those things where I address it immediately whenever I see it because I think you have to at all. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree that it's a difference between like lying about being on steroids and just choosing not to talk about it. And I agree that's for me, it would be very interesting to hear some people like, what do you do? But because I'm not gonna be tempted to hop on. But no, I totally see what you're saying. And some of these guys, some people that want to educate about the things, that's kind of the excuse to talk about it. I think, unfortunately, that's not, that they make this, I'm trying to not say names here right now, but it will still create some hype and some interest around it. Even it's like, oh no, we're talking about doing it in a safe way. We're doing the blood work in that. Well, you're still making like teenagers excited about roids.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a tough one because you could make the argument that, oh, people are going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's better education. But there's also going to be people who would never have done it, who saw their video and now are like, oh, that's a thing. Whereas before, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stories of people who saw Ronnie Coleman and were like, I want to look like that guy. And they just didn't realize, oh, he's on a whole bunch of steroids. Like they didn't even know it was a thing because it was just not really talked about. And so, yeah, there are benefits to transparency, but there are certainly a lot of downsides as well. I think when you start going into the details, that's where it gives people like an actionable, like, oh, this is a good starter cycle. Like this is what you should do. Like you should take this, and it's like it's a very easy compound to do. Yeah, it's like I think at that point it's a little bit much, and yeah, I really don't think it's appropriate, especially when the general YouTube fitness audience, especially on the bigger channels, is pretty young. We're talking teenagers. We're talking like early 20s, people who really just they shouldn't be. And you could say, oh, well, my audience is hardcore. My audience, like they're the hardcore athletes. Like, bro, if you have 1 or 2 million subscribers, most of them are kids. They're teenagers. Yeah, you can look at your YouTube metrics and say, like, look, there's a whole bunch of 35 to 40-year-olds. Yeah, a lot of those are kids on their parents' phones, stuff like that, like one YouTube account. And so YouTube skews really, really young. TikTok skews even younger. And a lot of this new sort of transparency or like we eat SARMs like candy, this kind of thing is it's on TikTok. It's really young. It's very visual. You see these transformations of, oh, here's a 16-year-old and now they're 17 and they put on 30 pounds of muscle or something crazy while getting leaner. And yeah, if you're a 16-year-old and you're skinny, I can see how that would be tempting. It's just not the right path to go down long term.
100%. So I was going to get to this conversation about steroids and all those things later, but I'm happy. It was a good talk. But I want to get into just training. Like, so I'll say this. Geoffrey is a bit more niched towards like bodybuilding and training. And to me, it's more like one of the things I talk about. So in my videos, I try to, like you, for instance, you can talk a bit more in, like use some terms that your guys are going to know, like stimulus to fatigue, RPE, these kinds of things. Obviously, some guys that follow me will be into that as well. But I try to, what I'm saying is, I feel like I have quite a high level of knowledge on this, but for my audience, I try to keep it so that everyone can understand, basically. So right now, I want to extract some good information from you to my audience, pretty much. So first of all, just tell us a bit about you as a lifter. Like, what's your style? If you're to describe your training, what is that like?
I would say it is tiring.
Yeah.
It is difficult. There's quite a lot challenging. Everyone is a little bit different here. Some people can do fairly low volumes and still grow pretty well. For me, I've always done well with a little bit higher volume compared to a lot of people. And in terms of effort per set, I also go pretty hard every single set. And so it is quite a lot of work, and the work is quite challenging and quite difficult. But that's sort of just what I need to grow as an advanced natural lifter. I sometimes get questions or comments along the lines of, well, how do you recover? Like, that's a lot of work and it's all very hard. How do you recover? Well, you can build up to it.
Yes.
You don't need as much when you're first starting out. So I would say most people should focus first on their technique, and then on their effort per set, and then on the volume in terms of how many sets they need. If you start focusing, and I've been guilty of this in the past, if you start focusing it in the opposite direction, first on the volume, then on the effort, then on the technique, it just doesn't work as well, because you want that volume to be able to pull that lever to, I can do a little bit more, I do a little bit less. But I think you want a pretty high level of effort and a pretty close proximity to failure, a high RPE for every set. And then you want your technique to be pretty dialed in. So in terms of technique, for me, it has changed over the years. There are some movements that I'm stricter with compared to a few years ago. And then there are some other movements that I'm a little bit looser in terms of my technique. Yeah. For example, the bent over row. Back in 2018, I would do cheat rows with 3.5 plates, super heavy weights, a lot of momentum, almost like a deadlift. And then you're getting a little bit of arm bend at the top. Then I went to a very strict style of row where there's no movement at all of the torso. You're really just trying to pull with the back. And that was okay, but it still didn't quite feel right, because you would almost just hit failure out of nowhere. So the issue with the cheat row was it's just too heavy. You can't control it. You're getting a lot of stimulus, but it's easier to get injured. It's more hips than actual back that you're trying to train. It's almost just ego lifting. You're using too much weight compared to what you should. But the other one, the ego was on the technique. The ego was like, I need to move really slowly, controlled, and squeeze at the top, get that tight contraction, that mind-muscle connection, and then you got to control the lowering all the way down. You got to count your tempo, and then you got to pause at the bottom for the full stretch, and then you start pulling again. The trouble with that is that when you hit failure, you're kind of just done. I can't pull it all the way up. Nope, you're just done. You can't do anything to work around that. You can do partials, but I wasn't really those. Those are a good option, but they weren't as much of a thing a few years ago. And so the issue is that it's just too light, it's too easy, it's not really doing much. And so now I kind of have a happy medium in the middle where it's not a whole bunch of slop. It's a powerful concentric, very, very aggressive, but also still controlled. I'm not flailing around. So I start the movement with the back, but I also use the hips if I need to. And I can't control at the top. It's too heavy. If you can pause your rows at the top, it's probably just not heavy enough for most people. If you're on steroids, okay, maybe different. Like, think things, training variables are not quite the same. But if you're natural and you can pause your rows at the top, my first thought would be, okay, you need to slap some weight on the bar. On the other hand, if I see someone flailing around and just launching the weight, not even getting it all the way up, in that case, it's probably a little bit too heavy. You want to be able to move aggressively, explosively, but also under control, and you want to be able to control that eccentric. I would say as a general rule of thumb, on pretty much any movement, if you can't control the eccentric, it's probably too heavy. Now, there are a few exceptions. Olympic weightlifting, it's sort of its own animal. It's designed just for the concentric only. You're not really supposed to control the eccentric. Maybe a high pull as well. A snatch grip high pull, it's more explosive in nature. It's more about that concentric and then catching the weight at the bottom. But I would say on the majority of bodybuilding style training, if you can't control that eccentric, it's probably just too heavy. Usually you're like 20, 30-ish%, maybe 50% on some movements, stronger on the eccentric. So if you can't even control the eccentric, it's probably where you're getting so many other muscles involved that it's just beyond what is actually useful or productive for the muscles that you're presumably trying to train. So on some movements, I've gotten a little bit looser. Other movements, I've gotten a little bit stricter. And I found that on a lot of movements, somewhere in the middle where you're moving naturally, it feels good. Sometimes other muscles are coming into play a little bit, especially near the end of the set. But you're still taking the tissues that you're trying to train close to failure, possibly beyond failure, depending on the movement.
Yeah, wow. I completely agree with that. And I feel like I recognize the journey of like the level of strictness with the form too. I would say in terms of training style, I'm somewhere in between you and Bald Omni-Man, I think, because I would tend to choose exercises a bit more like him. But the approach to the sets, I do very much like you, like this happy medium between flailing around and being super strict. And just being, very intentional with the exact way you're trying to perform your reps, but also taking it like to failure and beyond. I've done that since the start, like probably overdone it, if anything. And so that's something I see a lot in your training, obviously. And I can ask you about that right now, actually, like training to failure. What do you think about that? Or beyond even, high intensity?
Yeah, so I've actually noticed that you mentioned Bald Omni-Man, who's great, actually. He's fantastic. Love his content.
Love that guy.
I would say that it's interesting because different people you can tell their genetics are different. Like he's very gifted for strength, very, very gifted for strength.
Super
and so
strong.
You can tell that very, very strong. Yeah, much stronger than me. And so for me, I often need to add intensity to a set. I need to add something into a normal set to get more stimulus. But for him, he's already so strong that he almost has to find ways not to add stimulus, but to reduce fatigue. So I can tell guys like him, guys like Alex Leonidas, very, very, very strong guys. And I can tell that they are more focused, that they are less focused on the beyond failure type of stuff and more on the control side of things. And more on for example, Bald Omni-Man, I think he's done 5 plates on his RDLs.
Yes.
And so now he's like, okay, well, I don't want to use that much weight. I think it's heavy. It takes a lot out of you. I can't relate to that directly because I haven't done that much weight. But I've done 2.5 plates. I've done 3 plates. I've done 3.5 plates. I'm working towards 4 plates. And so I can almost extrapolate out, okay, a 5-plate RDL for 8 or 10 or whatever, yeah, that's tough. Like you want to find ways to not have to use that much weight, especially on the big spinal loading movement. So
Yeah.
I can understand to a certain extent where his head is at.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for me, especially on some movements, I'm trying to find some way to give a set a little bit more, just to get a little bit more out of the
Yeah.
set. It could be a partial. Maybe I'm doing a preacher curl and then I hit failure. I can't do anymore. And so now I'm going to find this rock back and forth. Because right now I'm doing my preacher curls on the hip thrust machine. So I'm kind of like sumo squatted down.
Yeah.
I'm like sumo squatted down on the back of the hip thrust. And so my arms are on the pad. It actually feels pretty good. And so when I hit failure, I can kind of like rock back and forth in the sticking point using the rest of my body, because I'm only using like 40 kilos, maybe 45 kilos, which is a lot. It's less than half my body weight. So I can actually do that kind of intensity technique. Or maybe I'm doing some rest pause. Maybe I'm doing some like forced eccentrics where if I'm doing push downs, okay, I get to the point where I can't finish the rep. Okay, maybe I use a little bit of body language. I get over the weight and I use my entire body to push it down, but then I control the eccentric, and then maybe I'm using a little crunch down, a little bit of hip flexor to get the weight moving to and beyond the sticking point. The key is to make it still challenging. I think that's where most people mess up, where they get a slowing rep, and then they're like, okay, it's time to cheat. Maybe, but you want to cheat barely enough to where it's still challenging for the muscle, the target, to where you're getting to that sticking point, but you still have to really work to fight through it. On a cable lateral raise, you can use a little bit of oomph, but you got to make sure you're still getting that stretch at the bottom. Then you're using you got to get that stretch at the bottom and then drive it up. If you hit failure and then you just sort of start teacup around and swinging, I think you're going to get a lot less out of it. And so you have to keep that mentality of holding the muscle to the fire, right? If the fire gets really hot and you use the intensity technique to take your hand away, you'd probably be better off not using any intensity techniques and just trying to train either 2 failure or 0 reps reserve, or maybe even 1. A quality 1 rep in reserve set, especially on big movements, that's really hard. I mean, a 1 rep in reserve on a leg press or a back squat or RDL, that's brutal. If someone says 1 rep in reserve is not challenging, I want to see what set they're doing, because I do not agree at all. And so it does depend on the movement, and then your head has to be in the right place as well, where you're using these techniques to make it more challenging, not less challenging.
Yeah. So there are many things I'd like to get into there, but about this, like how to cheat correctly, kind of, I think these are things that just come as you mature as a lifter, when you've been doing these things and these little micro adjustments, and you're just so in touch with your body that it's not a question of like, am I cheating too much or too little? Because you can already tell kind of just from the way it feels, right? So, and this is something I see a lot with you that I think is really great about you, is that you bring back the focus to, I think, like the lifter and the individual and their process, like learning like that. It's not just like, well, this is the exact amount scientifically you should be cheating. It's kind of explaining how it works. And this is what I get a lot from listening to you. Like, this is clearly a guy that's been in there and trying and adjusting and fine-tuning and just becoming more and more aware of what he's actually doing. And that's what I think is missing in a lot of the fitness stuff, like content, that it's just information, kind of like, this is the rep range for hypertrophy, or this exercise trains this, and this program, blah, blah. It's not so much focus on, well, you have to become good at this, the entire process. You have to become good at getting in the gym, knowing what you're going to do, how you're supposed to do it, how often, and so on, right?
Yeah, 100%. Really well said. And a lot of people are very numbers focused. They just, how many sets, how many reps. how many seconds on the way down, what incline bench, tell me how many degrees. And a lot of these things, I'm not going to say they don't matter, but they're absolutely secondary to how you can push a set or what your technique actually looks like or what you're visualizing during a set. And I almost feel like a lot of lifters, they don't want to hear the answers. They're not ready for the answers that are the real ones. Because you might ask a high level bodybuilder, either enhanced or natural, oh, why do you do this exercise this way? And sometimes they just say, oh, it feels better.
Yeah.
A lot of beginners are really dissatisfied with that answer.
Yeah.
Or I might say, oh, it's personal preference. Well, why do you do an Arnold press instead of a normal barbell press or something? And I say, oh, I just prefer it. And people are like, I need more details. And sometimes you give them the details. You say, okay, well, I prefer to have no back support so I can actually, force my core to do work, or I like the rotational aspect of it and how it makes, my shoulders feel. I like getting them up into that completely behind that, position. And so, but that's something that's kind of individual to me. And it can be difficult to convey that because it's so easy to say, oh yeah, hypertrophy 8 to 12 or 5 to 35 or whatever. Like these are just sort of pieces of information that are important, but they're guide rails.
Exactly.
They're guide rails, but they don't teach you how to drive the car. You learn to drive the car by getting in the car and driving the car. And it's nice to know 100%. Those guardrails and you should know where they are, but you don't spend all your time learning and studying where the guardrails are. No. Right? It'd be ridiculous. If you go to race car school and they're like, oh, here are the guardrails, part 1. Here are the other guardrails, part 2. No, like at a certain point, okay, yeah, maybe spend a little bit of time on that. But then let's get in the car. Let's start slowly. Let's be observant. Let's see exactly how this thing handles. But you gotta get in the car at some point. I think a lot of the science-based, not necessarily content creators, but the people who consume a lot of science-based content really attached to knowing pieces of information and not, oh, how does it feel? How does this move? Oh, I've had people say, okay, how does that feel? Maybe a client, they're doing, some kind of one-arm pull down or something. I say, oh, how does that feel? They almost don't know how to describe it, or they don't know what I'm asking sometimes. Like, I did 3 reps. I did 5 reps. I did 8 reps. Okay, that's not what I was. Yeah, I see. You sent me the log. But like, how did it feel? And they're just like, they don't have the words to describe it. They don't. They're not even really in tune or in touch with their own body about how it moves. And I think if someone doesn't have that time spent in the race car, a gymnast or even a distance runner to a certain extent, or a dancer, someone who has spent time moving their body, track and field athlete, a pole vaulter, or someone like that. I mean, if you spend a lot of time moving your body just generally, and then you go to bodybuilding training, those types of people have a lot easier time with it compared to people who have basically just been sedentary their whole lives. Because, you're sitting in the race car, but the race car has not moved in 30 years. So it's gotten a little rusty. One wheel is rolled over there. So it's you got to spend some time getting the race car back into shape and moving pretty slowly. And so I think going back to the cheating thing, I think there are no movements that I would have a beginner lifter cheat on, especially if they don't have like the ability to brace, the ability to feel how their body is moving. Maybe if I was in person coaching and I could see, okay, they could benefit from maybe moving, but online, I don't think I would ever write in a cheat row for a pure beginner. It's just so much can go wrong and so little, there's so little benefit because a chest supported row is going to be enough stimulus for them anyway. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, where As an online coach, you kind of gravitate towards stuff that is less possible to mess up, at least at first, before you know someone. Once you know
Yes.
someone, okay, like they can move well, they know, or maybe they like this movement, they've done it before. But if it's a blank slate, I would say more often than not, keep things strict, especially at first.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like what I tend to do is I have my exercise selection that I think is just a good starting point, you know. And then as I keep working with a client and we have a dialogue about it, now is when we can get into those movements that, like you say, maybe are a little easier to screw up first. So start with like basic variations of everything, build upon that. But it's interesting what you say, that just like ask someone, how you feel? How do you feel? Because like I said, I have done quite a bit of in-person training and I do a little bit still. And I find myself asking that all the time. And it's not like the sports journalist thing, just like, how do you feel? How do you feel? It's literally, I want to know how you felt during that set, because I know how much I determine what's going on through my own experience. I know that the person performing the movement, I can see some things from the outside, but they have access to some information that I don't, right? And these are the things that I agree with you, that it's kind of hard to, if I'm just about to make a video now and explain this, kind of like, how do I do that? It's not the easiest.
Yeah, you can usually tell the difference between a good in-person personal trainer and one that is not so good. I've seen a number of bad ones, not my current gym, of course, other gyms
Of course.
where where they don't really seem to be talking or like even looking at their client half the
Yeah.
time. Like they're on their phone or like they're not, there's really very little communication. Sometimes they're counting reps. And to me, it's like, okay, 3, 2 more. Oh, 1 more. Oh, good job. Like, how do you know though? How do you know they couldn't have done another one? Like, how
Exactly.
were you so, maybe they're such a good trainer. Maybe they're on another level from me and they just know, oh yeah, this guy's going to get 11 reps. I counted all the way down and yep, sure thing. They got that many, clairvoyant or something. But I think, yeah, a lot of it is less numbers focused and more how you're moving, because, and people might not want to hear this, a muscle doesn't necessarily know how many reps you got. Okay, it knows progressive overload, performance is very important, but what your muscle is experiencing in terms of tension, in terms of metabolites, in terms of potentially damage, it's not so smart that it's like, okay, he got 11 reps this time. Oh, we got 12 reps. Oh, we got 13 reps. Too many reps. It's out of the hypertrophy rep range, or 31 reps. So I get that all the time where people are like, I did 4 reps. I'm not going to grow at all from that. Well, it's probably not ideal, but you can still grow even from training that is not perfect on paper, right? Like these studies are just averages. And even in the studies, you'll see the individual response is going to be different. If they provide all the data, and sometimes they don't, unfortunately. I think it's getting better with open science. Even in the quote unquote worst group, and even sometimes if it was statistically significant, even worse group, there are often, especially in bigger sample sizes, people who responded better to the quote unquote worse condition. And that seems to be often just ignored by people who consume science-based content, and often people who create it. There are going to be some people who do better on quote unquote worst thing. And you don't necessarily know which group you're going to be in. Okay, on average, you might do better in that quote unquote good group because it's the good group, and on average, it was better. So if you had to bet, okay, I'm probably going to be better off here, at least starting here. But you might be one of those people where you're worse off in that quote unquote better group. And people don't really realize that. And especially if it's a smaller sample size study. I mean, if you get 3 Ronnie Colemans in one group, that group's going to do really well, even if it has nothing to do with the protocol. So a lot of it can be luck or can be chance. I do think it is getting better in terms of using people as their own control. There was a new study funded by Jeff Nippert, actually,
Oh yeah.
where one arm was full range of motion, the other arm was length and partials. It turns out no significant difference,
Yeah.
but that takes out the genetic component, because if there's a Ronnie Coleman in the study, well, he's still in both groups essentially.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about like the scientific side of fitness. I have my ideas, but I guess you talked about how it's not necessarily the creators, but the people that consume it. That get to me, I can say what I think, because you talked about these. What did you call it? Like the guarding rails or something. And to me, when I started learning all of this, I was consuming a lot of fitness content and diet content. But the way I always see it is that I trust my own experience over everything. That's science. I go and do science in the gym, right? So what I see it as, I get ideas from the science that I can maybe believe into. That sounds reasonable, but those are, like I said, these little things, and then I go and adjust and find out what goes for me. So that's kind of how I see it. That someone like me, I can get a lot of good information from scientific fitness content. I can get ideas, but in the end, I just kind of make it into my thing. So yeah, just what do you feel about the scientific side of fitness?
Yeah, so I mentioned the guardrails. I should note that I have sisters go outside the guardrails.
That too, of course.
Where they tried some crazy stuff in terms of either volume or in terms of rep range, some other variable, where then they get some beginner who has consumed this content telling the bigger guy that he's doing it wrong.
Yeah.
This guy would be so much bigger if he did more volume based on this study on beginner lifters. And it's just a wild take, because your own experience, yes, the sample size is considerably lower. It's 1. But that sample size of 1 is directly useful. It's something that is actually going to be, it's you, the N of 1 is you. And so what is more useful, that N of 1 on yourself or N of 100 on other people? Well, that study could give you some ideas, especially if it's very strong, or maybe subjects that were similar to you. But once you're an advanced lifter, I think studies on beginners are often of fairly limited value. Not always, but beginners often grow from cardio. I mean, you see studies where they'll grow muscle from cardio. So it's like, okay, they'll grow from almost anything. If you're completely untrained and you take your dog for a walk in a hilly area, you're going to grow muscle from that. They take people to outer space, they lose muscle because less gravity. So I think in the margins, gaining or losing muscle as a beginner it's just so easy to do that it has almost no direct utility for someone who is genuinely advanced. And so maybe a little bit, you could argue that, if it works on beginners, it'll work on advanced lifters. I don't think that's actually necessarily true. Again, like beginners growing from cardio, no advanced natural bodybuilder is going to grow from cardio.
Obviously,
it's just not going to happen. Yeah, maybe if you have like really undertrained calves and you start doing like an incline treadmill walk, like I can see that, sure. But I wouldn't say, that's the best way to grow your calves, right? It's if you haven't been training, and that actually essentially means that you're a beginner when it comes to calves, right? If you grow doing something really bad, it means you were not advanced in that area. And so, my arms are advanced, my calves are not quite beginner, but probably intermediate, somewhere in there. And so you can look at an individual, this person is advanced or intermediate or beginner, but you can also say, okay, well, what is this area? Because muscle growth is at least partially a local phenomenon. I would actually argue it's probably more local than holistic than systemic.
Oh,
So
I think so.
it's one of those things where I keep up with the science because I find it's interesting, but it doesn't necessarily inform a lot of my individual training decisions. I don't say, okay, there was this new study, I got to do this much volume or this exercise. That's how I used to think back in 2018. Oh, here's the study saying you should do this much. Guess I'll go do that. And I did. And it was too much for me to handle. And I wouldn't put that on the study authors. I would put that on myself. But I know I'm not the only person who did that. And I think a lot of people are falling into that trap of study found this. If I do that too, I will find the same thing. That's not necessarily true. And study protocols are not prescriptions. They are not training plans for people to copy. They are just trying to find out how the human body works on average, and how, if we do this much volume, this seems to happen. Or if we do this rep range compared to this one, this seems to happen. You're trying to isolate one variable and keep everything else static so that you know what is actually going on. But that doesn't mean copying that protocol is actually going to be useful for anyone, really.
Yeah, no, I feel like it becomes almost a little religious for some. Like, people like to feel like, I don't just go do bro stuff, like I look to the science, what the science says. This is the scientifically correct way to do things, and it becomes dogmatic in that way. And I think that's I'm not trying to point out someone to blame or something, just observing what's going on, kind of. It's that some people get a bit too sucked into the theory of that. Like, I have guys telling these things, and when I look at them, I'm kind of like, but why do you know all of that? You don't have to know that now, and in fact, you actually don't quite know it. You just have some external ideas that were put in your head, So I see this kind of paralysis. I guess that's not the only thing, but paralysis by analysis thing too, that people have overconsumed all this content. And now this thing said that, but that thing said that. And people are just confused. And I think what I just want to bring people back to is, look at the content, whether it's scientific or not. But then in the end, you learn by going to the gym and doing the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we're in a really weird place where I would say 6, 8, 10 years ago, science was cleaning up the mess of bro science. So bro scientists would say something really far out there, or something wild, or something that only worked in enhanced lifters, something crazy with regards to diet. Oh, you need to eat this many times a day. You need to eat this much protein. You need to eat a special kind of fish to thin the skin so you look a certain way. Oh, only these foods are good. You need to eat these foods to get shredded. The reason you're not getting shredded is because you're eating these other foods that are the wrong foods. When there have been piles and piles of bullshit put out by bro scientists, by the bros. And I don't want to downplay that. Massive piles, huge piles. And so science was kind of cleaning that up for a while. I would say up until a few years ago. Okay, the bro science comes out with something, science kind of debunks it, especially with regards to supplements, with diets, even to a lesser extent with training. Now it's almost the opposite. It's almost like the bros are looking at these studies and saying, actually, no, it's not a protocol that you should be following. And so we're in this really weird place where someone like Eric Bugenhagen is one of the more reasonable people to follow. And, it's like he reacts to his study and he's like, I totally understand where he's coming from, because I'll look at the details of the study and be like, that's not how anyone should really train. And it's almost like the bros are bringing reason and less dogmatic thinking to the table. And so we're in a really weird place, because a lot of people they like science. They like the idea of science. They like the certainty of science.
Yeah.
And just using science in apostrophes or parentheses after a title, I imagine that does quite a lot to the views. Otherwise, I don't think people would put it there.
No.
And there are some circumstances where I think that's reasonable, but it also can definitely go too far where I think they know what they're doing. And at a certain point, if the study says something ridiculous and that's not what people are actually doing to get big, what is more likely? This one study is right, and all those bros who got big and all these established training practices from the silver era into the golden era, what do top natural bodybuilders do nowadays? Is all of that wrong and this one study is right? Because that's how a lot of people act.
Yeah.
Right? This end of thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who got jacked, that is wrong. And this sample size of 8 people in this one study or whatever, no, this is the science because it has a PubMed link. And so, yeah, I think common wisdom and knowledge and just this exercise is good for this. Yeah, presses don't grow your delts. Like, I mean, they have for many years, like pull-ups, they don't grow your back. I mean, there's so many things that I've heard from the science-based side of things that, man, there needs to be a little bit of humble pie, I think, served where, and it's like, oh, this study comes out. Oh, preacher curls are better than incline. And then another study comes out. It says the opposite. So I think there's a lot of clickbaiting, a lot of hyper focusing on just the latest study. I kind of ignore a lot of that. I mean, I keep up with it, but I don't let it really impact me. I didn't stop doing incline curls when a study came out saying that something else was better, because I tried the other thing on myself and I was like, well, I actually saw better results with this. So you have to track your own training. You have to be observant, keep a training log, probably keep measurements, like find some way to actually see if what you're doing is working rather than just bouncing from study to study to study.
Exactly. And that's something I find so interesting, how some people seem to be able to just go against their own experience if some authority told them that this is actually better, because that's the thing to me. When you've gotten in and driven the car enough, if someone tells you what the car looks like and it's like, no, it doesn't. Like, I know I've been driving this car for quite some time, you're not going to... Yeah, you're not going to be tricked by that. And it's so interesting to me how many people just don't... I mean, do they even think for themselves is what I'm thinking. Like, just ready to listen to whatever.
Yeah, this is why... Yeah, well, this is why it's beginners who get sucked up into this, maybe intermediate, because when you go from... I think especially when you go from beginner to intermediate, that's where it's like, okay, I'm finding out what is working for myself. I have a general structure of what I respond well to. And then when you go from intermediate to advanced, and most people don't, that's when it becomes really hard to convince someone to drop everything that has worked for them for the past, 6, 8, 10, 15 years. So the idea that, oh, you're doing everything wrong, because there are a number of ways to clickbait on YouTube. There are a few science-based content creators who I have great respect for. You look at Dr. Eric Helms, Greg Knuckles, and there are a few others. But those guys jump out at me where they're slow to act. They don't like hype things up. They don't jump on bandwagons. They kind of like dig their feet into the sand, I think. And they are really just stable in terms of not letting themselves be dragged away, not really hyping things up. Whereas some of these newer, quote unquote, science-based guys, Jeff Nippert is pretty good as well. Although I think he's a little bit over-enthused with the length and partials thing. He's generally pretty good, though. I think he maybe overhyped those a little bit. Just a little bit. But there's a sort of new wave of some science-based creators where science is just something that they use in order to put out their own messaging. Because if you look at a lot of what they say, it doesn't actually line up with the science. And so you can tell the real science-based guys, they can tell they're full of shit, but often these guys have the biggest platform because they're willing to do the things that the real science-based graders can't or won't. And so the real science-based guys, you know, they'll call BS on them, but not too hard because it's reach. So they kind of, there's this symbiotic relationship. But yeah, there are certainly some who science is almost more marketing than they don't have science in their heart. Because when you have science in your heart, you have that spirit of well, we're not sure. Oh, well, let's wait. Let's get more information. Let's see a meta-analysis. Let's see another meta-analysis. Let's get information. We need another study. We need another study. And in some ways, it's a meme, like we're always going to need more studies. But we really do, because exercise science is not that old. And if you look at where we are now compared to 10 years ago, we actually have learned a lot, but we still can't jump to a lot of conclusions, especially when it comes to finding your own formula from science. We're a ways off from that. And so there are some people who are jumping to conclusions when if they actually had that science-based mentality, they would be a lot more conservative with how they spoke about things. And you can see them just, sometimes I think it's not malicious. They just get excited. They just, this could be the thing. Like this could be, it could be like this new biceps thing where we stretch everything really far out. Like that could be the thing. Yeah, like it could be, but it also could not be. And it most likely is not, because lots of people have gotten big arms doing other stuff. And so, yeah, I don't think it's malicious in a lot of cases. I think it's a case of poor judgment, high intelligence, low wisdom, and getting a little bit overexcited maybe before some should. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I want to move on to some other things, but I think, that you talk about like some bros having to kind of step in now, like the science came and cleaned up some bro stuff. But to me, that those are the guys that have been in it for a longer time and done their own science a bit, so they might even, because that's what I feel a lot, listen to some scientific focused content creators, when they talk about certain things, I'm kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. And I don't disagree with that. But what I would tell a person to do wouldn't be exactly this, I think that's what the bro does, like he can interpret these findings a bit better and compare it to reality, how it actually works, and come in and bring the nuance that way.
I think that's what appeals. I think for me, that's the appeal of someone like a Greg Nuckols or a Dr. Eric Helms. They both have a bro side to them. Like, I think Greg Nuckols set squat world record, 750 pounds or something. I remember him pause squatting 4 plates at the start of a video and just chilling at the bottom, just like hanging out down there. And he's like, oh, I should probably stand up. And he stands up. And then like hearing him talk about doing rear delt raises, and the conversation was about reps in reserve. And he's like, I will always take these to failure no matter what. I don't like, I think he said, I don't care what a study says. Like that is my default setting. I was like, yes. And then Dr. Eric Helms, professional natural bodybuilder, actually has been in there for several decades. I think what kind of grinds my gears are the people where they don't have that side.
Yeah.
They haven't really trained themselves to a high level. And so, they're a pencil neck. They're just, they're in there, they're reading the studies, they have a lot of information, but they haven't really done it. And I realize there's the excuse of genetics, or maybe the reason of genetics. Yeah, there's this bell curve. Maybe you fell in love with the science of how to get jacked and you're really far on the not so nice side of the bell curve. Like that does happen. But I think getting to a minimum level, like there's, when I see someone and they're like a hypertrophy expert and they haven't done anything really. I mean, I'm not saying you have to be like 25 FMI or 24 or 20 or even 22, but like when I see someone and they have a lot of information, but they haven't been able to really put that into action to get really any kind of results. To me, that's a big red flag. And those people often tend to put out the worst information because they don't have the shit test of, oh, I tried this myself and actually this was a really bad idea that I should never have done. I think also coaching people is probably a good one as well, because maybe someone's on that bad side of the curve, but if you've worked with enough people, that's even better in some ways, because you'll see how, the average person, the below average, the above average, the freaks, maybe if you have, one you work with, you'll see sort of the whole swath of how people respond. And so, I think if someone wants to talk seriously about hypertrophy, they should either have done it themselves, preferably naturally, or have coached quite a few people to have that practical side of things. And I'm not saying science has no value, and there are some people who I think are extremely knowledgeable, but I think there is a grain of truth to the, oh, why should we listen to you? You're not jacked.
Of course.
I think it's sometimes a little bit mean-spirited how it's said at times, but I still think there's at least a grain of truth to that.
No, I think it's super true. Like, it's not everything, of course. Like, oh, the biggest guy knows the most, not necessarily. But that's kind of my thing. Many times when someone wants to come argue about something you said in a comment or something, it's kind of like, well, post physique, because I want to know, should I, there's a certain level. If you're just looking like the average guy, it's kind of like, no, I've completely rejected what you just said. I'm sorry. That's just how it works,
Yeah. I mean, well, there's always if you know so much, why do you look like that? Right.
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, that's the goal of hypertrophy training. Is it to know more about hypertrophy training? Yeah. Maybe to a certain extent. I think that's cool. But I think for most people, it's not just knowing how to get jacked, it's getting jacked. Right. Yes. Like you have to actually do it, not just know it.
100%. And that's the thing. I think people don't understand too. Like, that's why I like following guys like you, because it's like you're like scientific experiment in yourself, in a sense, right? And you will talk about conclusions you draw from what you do and that. But some people, I think that they don't. It's like they don't realize that aspect. Like a person that has done something and seen what happens, they actually know something. They haven't just been have this idea planted in their head from someone else. But a lot of people confuse being like actually knowledgeable about something with just having consumed and taken in a lot of information. So often that kind of person actually thinks that, no, like, I've looked at the science, I'm not as big as you because I don't train as much, but I clearly know better than you, like how to get big, kind of. I think that's the mistake.
Yeah, and if someone is actually knowledgeable and, they're a doctor in sports science or sports medicine or something, I think that's one thing.
Sure.
But I actually rarely encounter issues with them. It's usually the beginners who got information from somewhere, but haven't really applied it themselves. So either new beginners or lifetime beginners, lifetime intermediates, guys who, they have a lot of this information, but they haven't really been able to apply it. And so often you get into the steroids or genetics kind of thing. And I think both of those are pretty common online. So it's like, I understand where they're coming from, right? But at the same time, I think these are mostly just coping mechanisms. Yeah. Where is the idea? Like, anyone bigger than me is on steroids. Well, that's how a lot of people think, right? And anyone richer than me must be evading their taxes or must be scamming,
cheating somehow.
Well, no, some people are just further along the road, or they have better genetics for it, or whatever. And then some people are on steroids as well. So, but I think if your head goes there first, it's probably a sign of something internal rather than the actual person. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. But okay, let's move on to some things that I just think I want to talk about things that just people should know that want to get jacked, basically. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is like when you work with clients as a coach or just talk to people because you talk to a lot of people, what would you say are like the most common mistakes that people do with their like training regimen? It could be diet too, but with the bodybuilding process.
Yeah. So I would say effort is a big one. Technique is a big one. Consistency is one that I kind of assumed for a while because I was always consistent. Even when I was going through hard times, like I always still showed up. Like, of course adherence. Yeah, you don't need to worry about that. But like, you kind of do have to talk about that because a lot of people, they do struggle with either motivation or scheduling or just getting in there. And so I think that has to be discussed. I don't think it's all that interesting of a topic. You get into like psychology and sort of dopamine and progression and how, why do some people stick with it and lift forever, lift for life? Most people don't.
Yeah.
A lot of people have a phase of lifting in their late teens or early 20s. But when you get into the workplace and there's a lot of stress and pressure and it takes time and you got to shower and maybe you have kids and stuff like that, a lot of people just stop lifting.
Yeah.
I would say the majority stop lifting. If you walk down a busy street, what percentage of people regularly lift weights? I mean, less than half, I would say, probably. And what percentage have actually achieved a decent physique? Oh man, not very many at all. It's like less than 5%, I would say.
Yeah.
And how many get within 5 to 10-ish pounds of their theoretical genetic and natural muscular potential? Way less than 1%. Yeah, way less than 1% are even clawing for those last few gains and are truly elite. Probably 1% of 1%. And so I would say adherence is a big one. Again, not an interesting topic for me personally, but it is important. After that, technique. I see a lot of people where they're just not moving in a way that is actually targeting the muscle that they think they're targeting. So maybe they're squatting, and the squat is a great quad movement, but if you're only going down to like barely above parallel and you're sitting the hips way back and you're inclining the torso and you're using a low bar position and you sort of every single rep and it looks more like a good morning and your knees are not even really going forward very much, it's probably not a very good quad exercise. It's probably more glutes or back. I mean, you look at how most Instagram models squat. So I've heard. I've never actually seen this kind of content. But I've heard that they squat in that way because it's better for the glutes. But if you want to build your quads and you're copying that style, well, you're probably not going to have very much success. And so knowing how the body moves and knowing the function of a muscle, just fairly basic biomechanics, will usually let you move in a way that actually targets the areas you're trying to target. If you're doing, let's say you're doing a bench press and you want to target your chest and you're using a super narrow grip, well, you're probably running out of room on your triceps before you're actually training the chest. Or maybe you're using a super wide grip and the range of motion just isn't very much, or maybe you're using a ton of leg drive, you're heaving the bar, or you're dive bombing and bouncing, or you're having your partner help you up every rep. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is just not going to be particularly productive in terms of technique. And then I would say effort as well.
Yes.
Everyone, even myself, they don't work as hard as they think they work because it feels worse than it actually looks. If you film a set, you look at it after, it seemed slower and more difficult when I was actually doing it. So I think filming myself was very useful. Back when I started creating content, I realized that felt awful, but I probably had more reps just based on how it looked and how the rep speed was slowing. And I think you don't always have to go to the gun to your head type of mentality. I think it's probably a little bit too draining, especially if you can actually visualize that. But most people, if things were actually on the line, they'd get multiple more reps. You know, we're talking 3, 5, sometimes 6, 8, 10 reps. Most sets that I see in commercial gyms, there's just no slowing at all. There's just, it almost looks casual. I've seen people on their phone when doing leg extensions. Stuff like that. It's just, there's just no gusto. There's no vim, vinegar. It's just not where it needs to be in order to stimulate muscle growth. Because if you think about it, what activates the muscle? Mind. It's your brain. And that requires a lot of effort. Easy training will always be dog shit for hypertrophy. And so if anyone is selling an easy or a quick fix for hypertrophy, but especially easy, it's just more thing, because it's always going to be difficult. It's always going to be challenging. It doesn't challenge you. It doesn't change you. And so, I would say effort, technique, programming, probably not as much as those two. When I look at a lot of programs, sometimes they can almost always use some work. But if you're not making gains on like a generic push-pull leg split or something, or upper lower, or something fairly basic, and you're a beginner, I think it's either not eating enough. That's a big one. Maybe not getting in enough protein. It's not as common though as just not getting enough calories. Effort could be technique, could be consistency. Effort is probably the big one. A high degree of effort fixes a lot of things. And you see some people where their program doesn't look really particularly special. They're outside the gym, like recovery is not great. Like maybe they're going out partying and drinking and stuff, and they're still making progress, and you can see the effort is there. But if you remove that one thing of the effort, I think it's really hard to get around that, if not just impossible. There's just no way to make easy training work for a natural lifter. Now, if you're enhanced, I think that conversation changes a bit, where you don't necessarily need to stimulate muscle protein synthesis in the workout. It's kind of already just going. And so as long as you kind of move around and get the blood flowing, like you'll grow from it. I've heard some crazy stories of people where they got a quad pump walking their dog, or they got a biceps pump washing the dishes, stuff like that. And it's just, I think, especially if you're on a lot of stuff, the training is so important at the highest levels. But for a lot of people, if they start blasting away, you'll grow. But again, where does that lead? I think it's much better to learn how to train first and then go down that road later, much later, if you really want to. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. I agree with everything. And like the consistency thing, we don't have to get into, but because what I think about often is, what's the difference between me and other people that show up, but they don't get results and I do? Like, apart also from, okay, I work with this, so I can prioritize it a bit more, but they are showing up, they are consistent, they're doing but why is nothing happening? And to me, I agree with you. It's the effort and consciously progressing. Like, I feel like I hammer down on that. And it's not just about muscle growth, by the way, that if you want to become better at something, there needs to be an active thinking of, how do I progress? How do I challenge myself more? And that's what I see a bit too many people just do. They just show up and kind of go through the motions and tick off their sets and reps. But there's no like intention of, I did this last time, I got to try to beat it this way this time, So it's both the effort, but actually like actively trying to progress. I feel like too many people are just waiting for the weight to just, it feels lighter today, so I'll add weight or something,
Oh, 100%. Yeah. That's one that I should have mentioned where it's almost become where I have to say progressive overload at some point. That's in every video because it is that
Yeah.
important. And those who get it, they just know and they kind of roll their eyes like, oh, he's talking about progressive overload, like, duh.
Mm,
But yeah, there are a lot of people who they either don't know it at all, which does happen sometimes where they're like, oh, like I have to add weight and get stronger to get bigger. Like that's
yeah.
oh okay, like cool. Like occasionally that happens. More
Mm,
often than not, though, they've heard of progressive overload. They just haven't been doing it. And
exactly.
sometimes that's because of what is happening between sessions. Like, oh, you're a skinny guy and you're 11% body fat and you're not eating very much and you're not
Mm,
progressing. Like, well, yeah, just you don't have the energy and the reserves to synthesize the tissue that you stimulated, right?
mm,
There's nothing there to put some meat on the bone, right? But I would say the most common is people who they know about it, they know it's important, their situation is okay in terms of diet and sleep and stress, but they're not pushing the sets hard enough and they're not looking towards that next weight. They're not
mm,
actively pushing towards that and saying, okay,
exactly.
I'm using this weight now. I want to get more reps. I want to use more weight. Okay, now my reps went down. I'm going to build the reps back up. Okay,
Mm,
now I'm hitting sets of 10 with these dumbbells. I'm going to bump up the weight. Oh, now I'm only getting 6. I want to
mm,
get 7. I need to
mm,
get 7. If I don't get
exactly.
7, there's something wrong. I need to fight for that. Okay, I
Mm,
got 7. Ooh, nice. Now I want to get 8. I want to get 9. You want to, and then you build the weight back up, and it's this continuous sort of back and forth needle of I'm building up the sets or building up the reps, building up the weight, and then back and forth and back and forth. But there has to be a knowledge of what you did last time, so log booking, but then
mm,
also this desire and this drive to
mm,
do better. Yeah, so I would say that that's probably the biggest one. Just that curiosity and that hunger in order to do better. And it's hard to teach that.
mm,
Sometimes people get it, but teaching passion is a lot harder than teaching information. And so I think
mm,
that's why a lot of content creators they just default to this is the numbers for this. It's just a paint by numbers kind of thing.
mm.
Um, I don't think Picasso painted by numbers.
No.
I think he had his own thing going. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do, though. Like my most recent YouTube video before this one, what did I call it? Like I tried to come up with some title, but the point is really like the physique versus the man, kind of. And I want to bring people's attention to like being that guy in the gym that slays it, like that looks forward to. I did this last week. I'm gonna try to beat it, because that's also a thing for me that I think I also used to when I had a more shallow entry point to fitness. Pretty much just like I would like to look better to impress mainly girls, but maybe guys a little bit too. I couldn't really think like that. Like I thought more of just the external result, and then the training and everything. It just becomes like the thing you have to do to get that. But I now when I'm loving the training just as I know you do. It's like if I don't get to train today, I'll be upset. I'll be sad about it. It's not like I dodged a bullet there. So I kind of try to like, of course. Something is going to have to be lit inside of that person, but I kind of try to show that look, you can actually enjoy this. This is I had fun building this physique. It wasn't just like all hard work, discipline, stuff that needed to be done.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree with that a lot. And it's tough because a lot of people show up with that results focused mindset. I have a
Mm,
goal physique. This is where I am. This is where I want to be. I need to do this, and this to get here. Okay, let's do it. And that can work in the short term. But
mm,
if you don't enjoy it, if you don't have a passion for it, a lot of the times they don't keep what they built, if anything.
mm,
Either they
mm,
don't get there, especially if the goal was really ambitious. I've seen some ridiculous goals, right? I want to
mm,
look like this Hollywood celebrity. It's like,
mm,
okay, well, you're like 35% body fat, so yeah, it's gonna be a little bit of a might take some time. Um,
Mm,
if even if they do get there, it slips away because they feel like, oh, I got it. Now what do I do? Oh, I slip back into my old habits, that old comfort. Whereas if someone is more process focused, yeah, they get there, but now they want to still do better at the process. You know, they have a
mm,
new goal, or they just want to see how far they can take this thing. And
mm.
so, yeah, I would say trying to like curveball people into being more process focused,
Yes.
I think is something I try to do where I like knowing where their head is at
Mm,
initially, but almost like slowing things down and saying, okay, like that's good to have in the back of our mind, but let's focus on improving the day to day stuff and
mm,
log booking and having our eyes on bigger. I find that those are way more important than like, oh, I want to build this much muscle or lose this much fat. Like those things
mm.
will happen as long as they're reasonable goals if the process gets good enough. But if the process is secondary, it just doesn't work as well, especially long term.
100%. What was it I was thinking there? Process. Yeah, what I often say to people, because I try to, I know that I didn't look at things the way I look at them now when I started, right? Like what I'm lucky with when I got into fitness this time is that I started from rock bottom, and my entry point was literally I just want to feel good and prevent this panic attack episode from ever happening again, And then, as sort of a side effect of that, I got my bodybuilding results that I wanted when I was younger. And so now I could quite early in my journey kind of like, okay, I can enjoy and have fun with that without making it the end all be all thing. But I still recognize some things of like, when will I get to this number? When will I have this detail on my physique? Like thinking a lot about that. And what I tell people is kind of that I'm telling you how you want to be looking at things eventually, but the further away you are from the result you would like, the harder it is to like not think about that at all. Because I think like you and me right now, like I'm very happy with my physique and my entire regimen. It's like I don't feel like I need to get better in that sense. I don't have the result I would
Yeah.
like. Then it's quite easy, of course, to just completely lean into the process. Like I'm very happy now, and I keep being happy doing what I do.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people they kind of they feel very badly about how they look. They have a
Mm,
very negative self-image, and I've heard several times on questionnaires where someone says something like, "I just want to build a physique that I can be proud of." And to
mm,
me, it's the phrasing is a little bit of a red flag. It's like, oh,
mm,
you're not proud right now. You're not happy right
mm,
now.
mm.
And so it's coming from this very negative place. And I'll even
Yeah.
have this projected onto me at times. You know, I'll show a before of me as a skinny distance runner, and
Mm,
people will be like, oh, you must be so much more confident now or so much
mm,
happier now. And
mm,
it's like, they're just assuming that based on the pictures. I mean, I would say that's true, but comparing a 15-year-old me to a 35-year-old me, yeah, of course I'll be more confident now that I'm not like an awkward high school or freshman. Like, yeah, like duh. But
mm,
to them, I can tell that that emotion or that feeling just came from the images. It just
mm,
came from like the oh wow, like the
mm,
arms and he's jacked versus the oh he's skinny and puny and those things. I was
mm,
happy as a distance runner. Like
mm,
I was confident 16, 17, 18-year old. And people assumed that I wasn't just based on how I looked. And so I think for a
mm,
lot of people come from this really negative place. And it's not even about how they will look in the future. It's just about not looking the way they look now. And I don't think
mm,
that's a great starting point. It can be motivational,
mm,
but I think self hatred or self dislike is often just not as sustainable as self love. Like I train
mm,
because I like it and for me. And, I don't train because I'm running away from my old physique or anything. Even when I started, it wasn't, it was never, oh, I hate how I look, or I don't like how I look. Even when I was a little bit chubby, if I stopped running for a little bit, I knew that I should keep running because it was good for me, but I wouldn't like look in the mirror and say, "Oh, you suck" or anything like that. And so I think a lot of people, it's a difficult thing because it does get into psychology, and sometimes I almost feel like I'm not 100% equipped to deal with some of these issues, especially if someone is clearly dealing with something else that is a little bit beyond my area of expertise. And sometimes you can use that as fuel, but you kind of have to be careful about getting into those patterns of like, I'm a piece of shit. Yeah, let's do the set, that kind of thing. Negative self-talk. I think it can get it done in the short term, but long term, it's probably not the best fuel to throw on the fire.
No, I completely agree. And I always talk about that a transformation like this has to come from a place of self-love. And of course, that's not, you can't just choose that if you currently very hard on yourself. But so the way I see it is like some of the worst motivations, they can be like stepping stones towards something else. It's kind of also like the thing, oh, I start training because I feel insecure about girls. Well, if that's made you start training, that's great, but it's not going to be sustainable to have that as your only motivation. And I know quite a few guys that started with a reason like that and then found something in the gym,
Yeah.
But I think bringing it back to the process-oriented thing, to me, it's again obvious from like how I came into all of this, because I go through that thing with the panic attacks, and I'm very great. I feel like I've been given a second chance at life, and I feel pretty good just not having panic attacks, and so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start. Maybe it's true. Maybe I should eat better and train and that. And that was tough for me then because I was not in good shape on any level. But I noticed so quickly that I felt better from it. And that making the connection of, I did these things, I felt resistance towards doing, but I was like disciplined and I did it. And now I feel better. Like, thanks me for what you did, And the way I see it, the physique is fun and we're bros. We like bodybuilding, absolutely. But it's more like the trophy. It's like the receipt to what you're actually doing. Like if we look at Geoffrey today, it's not, oh, I must be happy now because he looks that way. It's more like, no, he looks that way because he's very happy with what he's doing, kind of,
Yeah, no, there's that mental side of it where, yeah, if you're stressed out or if you're super busy or if you just don't feel good about yourself, yeah, that can definitely impact how you look and how the training is going. It's not just, your mind impacts your body, but your body impacts your mind. It's sort of a two-way street. And, there's going to be causation in both ways. And I'm sure there are people who see my sets and think, oh, he must be fighting with demons or anything like that. No, I'm fighting with angels. Like they're helping me. Yeah, we're fighting against the weight. It's not. There's nothing. There's no negative side of it. I'm just trying to do my best because it's something I enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah, like when I see your sets, I just like that's a guy that's as dedicated, as serious about what he's doing as I am. He takes pride in pushing the sets like that. The faces, they are not out of anger or something. It's like you look like that when you put yourself through very, very high effort, right? But even I think there's even a way to do like, how should I phrase it? Like all the negative pressure into a good thing, like. What I mean is this, that I've started recently, I listen to kind of angry music and I kind of channel almost like a character. That's like a little bit, it's like, it's the little boy me who's like hurt over the things that happen in his life. But it's more like I'm fighting for him. It's not beating that kid down. It's more like I'm beating the demons inside. It's like, it's for me. It's actually, it's like, it's a little bit angry and aggressive, but it's not negative as in I suck, I need to be beaten up or anything like that. So I think there's even a way to get a little like angry and primal like that while still being in a positive mindset,
Oh yeah. Like you need aggression and you need some anger, but it doesn't need to be, as you said, it doesn't need to be directed inward. It's directed outward. And I need some form of hard physical activity, not
Mm,
necessarily every day, but a few times a week.
mm,
If I'm, maybe I go on vacation or I go back to my wife's hometown or thing. Okay, the first day I'm fine. The second day I'm fine. Third day I'm like, all right, well, like I have a lot of energy. Like I want to, I got to get this out. And
mm,
so it could be run, it could be push-ups. As long as it's mentally and physically challenging. And you
mm,
mentioned something about trying to get big to impress girls.
mm,
Um, I think if someone one motivation I've seen is if the girlfriend broke up with the guy,
mm.
oh now he's going
I
to go
see.
to the gym a lot. I think that is a negative. I guess it's also maybe a positive, but I think it's mostly a negative thing.
Mm.
But you also have to compare it to instead of what.
Exactly.
It's like in nutrition, you assess some piece of food, okay, but you have to assess it compared to something else that you might eat because you
Mm,
have a limited sort of budget of calories. Is this food healthful compared to what? Right? There has to be this
mm,
comparison. Is your girlfriend breaking up with you and you going really hard in the gym for a few months and maybe like going monk mode or really dedicating yourself to this for a few months?
mm.
That might not be coming from a good place, but what else would you be doing otherwise? Like, would you be getting drunk? Would you be doing drugs? Like, there's a whole bunch of
Mm.
other outlets that you could be going down or roads that you could be walking. And
Exactly.
so I think it's hard to think of like a better outlet for that type of thing than the
Mm,
gym. I mean, I
mm,
guess business, maybe like you throw yourself into your work or something. I think that can work as well.
mm,
But yeah, the gym is really good for that kind of thing where maybe you're a little bit frustrated or you don't feel like life is going well. That
mm,
could be one way to get your emotions out or your anger out or just your energy out.
mm,
Whereas some people, they go down some other roads, which I think can have more negative consequences. Because like the gym is pretty safe overall, as
mm.
long as you're kind of smart about things, which you might not be if you just got broken up with. Like, there's this meme of like, oh, I hear my bro is loading up 3 plates on the bench press. He's never done 2 plates. His girlfriend just broke up with him. Like, we got to go
Yeah.
help him. Um, but yeah, I think for the most part, the gym is a pretty good outlet overall.
Mm. Oh yeah, like I think in those terms always, because I've learned I used to be much more black and white thinking person, and now I realize that everything is some shade of gray. And so there's I have a mindset of that too, against perfectionist mindset. I think about what's the second best option kind of mindset, because a lot of people they have a perfectionist mindset. I missed the workout. I suck. I just stopped training. Oh, I ate a piece of cake. Ah, that was bad. I eat another one and I go to McDonald's too, that kind of thing. But the second best option, if you ate a piece of cake that you shouldn't have, is to just stop there, right? It's like, and so while
Yeah.
someone can have like toxic reasons to go to the gym or something, it's still an activity that builds them up somehow physically, right? And that's a thing that can transition into something good. While if I get broken up with and I start doing drugs, that's not going to turn into a good thing at any point. So, yeah,
Yeah, there's no positive.
and what you said about the
Yeah.
foods too, that's also like take something like protein bars. They're kind of glorified candy with some protein in it, right? But for some
Yeah.
people that really struggle with some sugar craving, if having the protein bar is what makes them stay away from the worse option, it was a decent option in this context. So yeah, nuance.
Yeah, and it's where you kind of have to meet people where they are, at least
Mm,
partly. Like if you look at someone who has a really bad diet, I mean, if I see someone who should or wants to lose a lot of weight, I would
mm,
almost rather see their diet be as bad as possible because it means that you can only get better. And so if I
Uh,
see someone who's quite obese and their diet report is like meat and vegetables only, they have a
mm,
really healthy diet. Like,
mm,
there's just not a lot of room to optimize. Often they're full of it. And in some cases, like there's some stuff sneaking in. Like there's
yeah.
entire TV shows about secret eaters where they say they're eating healthy and then they're slipping in, a jar of peanut butter at night or something.
Mm,
And so I would almost rather see their diet be really bad because it's just so easy to, oh, you're drinking 2 liters of soda a day.
mm,
How about diet? Like
yeah.
there we go. We just saved a lot of calories and you don't
Mm,
even know the difference. And
mm,
so that kind of stuff is it's easier to meet people where they're at when they're in a really bad situation because they only really can get better from where they are. So
mm,
it's I see a lot of people who almost content creators in a lot of cases where they won't meet people halfway or even at all,
mm,
and they say, "Oh no, you need to be eating this, and this, eating at these
mm,
times, these foods, this
mm,
training," and it's just not realistic. It's just not
mm,
sustainable. I mean, when I hear about chicken breast, broccoli, and rice, that kind of thing,
mm,
I don't think I stick to that kind of diet. Like
mm,
that's a lot of really specific foods, and so when I hear people weighing their food to the gram and everything is perfect, if I don't think I could stick to that, I think most people won't. Maybe for a
mm,
few weeks it's possible, but yeah, long term you have to have that flexibility for sure.
mm. Yeah, no, I approach that a little different with different clients. But what was it? You said about the diet, and well, whatever. I forget where I was going. But I want to talk about diet though. Two things. Like I would just want to know a little bit about. Oh yeah, now I remember meeting people where they're at. That was the point. I think sometimes when you, as a coach and content creator, present like I pretty much do everything perfectly. Of course, I don't, but in the eyes of the person watching, like I hit all my workouts. They're very hard. I keep progressing. I'm very on point with my diet and this, and also the talk in some videos. In my case, like kind of harsh, disciplined talk like this, but I know that again, there's nuance is necessary. That's not always the way to go. And so a lot of people are kind of surprised when I start working with them, just looking at their entire life situation. And let's say they want to lose weight. I'm often like, you know what, let's not even go for a calorie deficit first, because your current situation is just so far off. Like first of all, maybe you have like stress at work and family, and you're already leaning a lot on like some junk food. That's your kind of vice, and you're not going to the gym. And we're gonna like there are many things that need to happen here. So I even first, what I often do is like, let's just get you into the gym consistently and hitting workouts well, and let's more focus on the quality of the diet. Let's create the sort of plan that we want to follow, but let's not even try to lose weight like that. And when I can see that, okay, you can adhere to it, like just a decent regimen like that. Okay, now is maybe when we get more intentional with calories and cutting and things like that. But yeah, I wanted to move on. I would just
Yeah.
be a little interested to know about your diets, because I don't know so much more. I see you post a cake here and there when it's like bulking time, but I do not know kind of like what your base diet looks like. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about like bulking and cutting. So maybe could you start going in that direction?
Yeah, so I have always done a little bit better at a slightly higher body fat percentage.
Mm,
I've cut down to like 8, 9, 10, 11% body fat several times, but I never really seemed to be able to make much progress when pretty lean. And
mm,
so I seem to do best in the sort of 15 to 20-ish percent range. I've gone a
mm,
little bit above 20%. Um, but I think at that point, especially now, it's just a lot of weight to carry around.
mm,
So, right now I'm around 228,
mm.
103-ish kilos. And
And
I
how
don't think
tall
I
are
would
you?
want to
Because people will
go
want to know.
6 feet. Yeah, so
Mm,
6 feet, 1.83 meters. Excuse me. So it is a pretty hefty amount of weight to carry
mm,
around. And so I don't think I would want to go up to like 110 kilos, 240 pounds, 115 kilos, 250 pounds. I think at a certain point, even if you're natural, it's possible to get to a body weight with enough muscle and fat that it's probably not the healthiest.
Mm-hmm.
And so, 240, 250 is a bit high. But I still find that bulking and cutting is useful.
Mm.
I might actually start slightly main gaining from this point, where I'm gaining very, very, very slowly. And I'm just sort of staying in a pretty small window. And I'm kind of just either slightly recomping or slightly gaining. In the long term, main gaining and recomping are pretty hard to separate, because one is like a very, very, very slow bulk. One is you're the same body weight and you're kind of just trading fat for muscle. So right now I'm pretty happy with not manipulating my body weight too much. So I'm pretty much always between 225 to 228, maybe 230. And I'm kind of just focused on training. But I think for most people, if you're an intermediate, bulking and cutting way to go. A good rule of thumb is that the leaner you are, the more you can benefit from a bulk and a cut. Whereas if you're 18% body fat, 20% body fat, I don't think bulking too much beyond that really makes sense. And most people can make gains at 18, 19, 20% body fat without bulking. If you have to bulk at that level, I think, first of all, it's probably not worth it. Second of all, it's probably a sign that your training is not on point. And I have seen some people try to cover up bad training with an excessive dirty bulk. Because if you gain enough weight, your bench press is going to go up. Like it's just going to happen. And so it's kind of inevitable, But for me, my diet is, I don't eat that much in the morning. So I usually stick with just coffee and maybe like a protein shake mixed in with the coffee, like some kind of mocha. So that's my morning. I have a pretty big appetite. So even if I get in, and I don't count calories anymore, but even if I get in 3,500 or 4,000 calories, probably somewhere around there, I don't necessarily need to start eating really early. So I can eat that all in the afternoon and evening after training pretty easily. And so the morning I keep a little bit of protein just because I like to have that in, and then just coffee. And then going into the workout, either fasted or maybe something really small, especially on a lower body day. I like to have something, banana and a protein shake, something really quick and digestible, maybe a sandwich, like peanut butter sandwich or something, like just something small before the workout. Just because my workouts are pretty long and they're pretty intense. And so I found that, if I go in totally fasted, I can do a few sets, hit them hard, but then I find myself resting a little bit longer and the workout dragging a little bit. Whereas if I'm fed and if I'm fueled, I think Jay Cutler said he'd like to have 4 or 5 meals in him before he trained. And he did a lot of volume and he was obviously very, very large. So maybe it's a little bit different, obviously enhanced as well. But I think, maybe as you get more advanced and you're doing more volume and you're bigger, you might find a pre-workout meal is more important. When I started, I didn't even really think about it. It wasn't really needed. For now, something just small before the workout I find is useful. At least 25 grams of carbs, at least 25 grams of protein, if I'm going to have it. There's no point in just having pure carbs, in my opinion, or pure protein. I think you want that mix before the workout. And then during the workout, I used to have like a liter of skim milk plus half of orange juice during the workout. I've toned that down a little bit. So usually it's just like a couple of sports drinks, like a couple of Gatorades. And that's mostly in the summer, just because it's so hot and humid here. I want something going in as electrolytes and fluid are going out. Just to rehydrate and get ahead of that. And then post-workout, usually, some kind of fried rice, some kind of, I have chocolate milk after the workout as well. That's something I've been having the past few months. One or two cylinders of that, toss it down. I figure if I'm going to have chocolate milk, it might as well be post workout. And then in the evening, could be fried sandwich. I eat healthier than I used to back in like 2021 and 2022. There was definitely some 2021 where it's like I go back and eat an entire 12-inch pizza or something, or Burger King or something else. So for now, it's one of those things. I think hitting 35 years old, I'm a little bit more not even health conscious, because it's not something I consciously I gotta eat healthy now. It's just like I find myself straying more towards more vegetables, more fruits, more lean meats, just overall healthier options. And if someone's a younger guy, I think it's good to start that early. On the other, it's probably just not as necessary. If someone is 21 years old and they have fast metabolism and they're skinny and they want to get big, and they say, should I dirty bulk? Well, my answer is no. But if they did, probably not the end of the world to do once or twice, a little bit. But I think once you're into your 30s, it gets harder to get away with that. And that kind of stuff catches up to you a little bit more. And so I think I've almost subconsciously realized that and gone more towards more filling foods and maybe capping the bulks slightly leaner, especially as my body weight overall goes up.
Yeah.
But I think as long as you're hitting a sufficient number of calories for whatever your goals are in terms of either fat loss or muscle growth, and then also a sufficient amount of protein, which I don't count either at this point. I think those are going to be the two big things for nutrition, for bodybuilding, and then just generally eating healthy. So enough vegetables. I'm always surprised at how many people just don't eat any vegetables, like nothing, just not at all. That happens a surprising amount where it's all processed foods, all of it, just no vegetables, very little fruits even. Yeah, some protein, but yeah, you need more than just protein and calories in your diet. The quality is important for long-term health. For muscle growth, maybe not as much, but I still think long-term it's a good habit to get into.
Yeah, what I tell people about bulking and the diet is that you want a foundation of healthy foods, but if you have a hard time getting in enough to gain weight, especially that kind of person, if you sprinkle in some less than ideal foods on top of that, I think it's very different because you're getting it's not just about macros, right? It's about micros too. So if you can address the majority of your macros through healthy foods, that will also give you a lot of micros. Now, if there's a little bit of extra, just energy on top, of course, you can be conscious. You just don't there's a gradient here again. But that's kind of what I do when I bulk, because it's kind of interesting. I do a similar thing to you in the morning. It's just a shake with collagen and orange juice, really. So a little bit of carbs and a little bit of protein. And for me, that's really just, I'm into fasting a lot. And I just want to ask you a little bit about that in a bit. But I just started I have a good appetite, but I just kind of enjoy being fasted or almost fasted in this very small thing. So yeah, I get that in, but then to me, it's a little bit of a chore to have to deal with all the food. So I do exactly this, that I have a foundation that maybe my maintenance calories are like healthy foods, but then I will eat the pizza and stuff now just to get the calories up like that. Yeah. But it's kind of interesting. For me, it's I have great appetite. If I have to eat a lot of food, I'm happy to do it. It's more just, I don't crave it so much. So it's always this, I have to eat. I have to buy food, I have to prepare it, and I have to eat it. It all takes time, No, but so I just want to ask you, because it's an unusual thing I do that I'm not over excited about. I just like it, fasting, both intermittent fasting and prolonged fasting. So do you have any takes there? How do you feel about fasting?
So I haven't done any long-term fasting. I know Atlas Power Shrug has
Yeah.
done a number of long-term experiments. Yeah,
Mm.
with 3-day fasts, and I think he's done 7-day, maybe.
Let me tell you, I have
And
done
he
a lot
seems to
more
have
than him,
lost.
just to be clear. So,
Okay.
but
Okay.
so I'm just happy to
Just for
see
the
him.
record.
Yeah. But I'm kind of happy to see another like natural bodybuilder kind of guy get into it like that. So, yeah. No, but please go on.
Yeah. Yeah. So I haven't done that much myself. I guess I have a base of intermittent fasting where I don't. Yeah, I'm the same way. Like if I eat, I can eat a lot, but I don't necessarily feel the need to eat in the
Mm.
morning. I'm not like. I think this is maybe a little bit of a hot take. I think that if you roll out of bed and your first thought is food, oh, I need to eat, that's probably not a good sign, I think that's a
Mm.
sign of maybe some blood sugar control issues or something else going on. I think you
Mm.
should be able to feel comfortable not eating. I think that's actually a sign of good health
Yeah.
and a good regulation where, yeah, you wake up and like you don't need to eat. You could eat, if someone, if I'm visiting people and they say, oh, let's go to this restaurant in the morning or around noon or something, yeah, like I could go and I could eat. But if I don't start eating, I don't really feel the need to start eating. Right.
Mm.
So I have a longer term fat, mostly fat or pretty much only fat from what I go. Maybe I'll try some time. It must be tricky if you have like a family or social arrangements or some kind of, because it's almost weird if you're not eating. I would imagine if you're
Yeah.
sitting there and people are like, "So you gonna have something?" No, I'm not eating. Is there some kind of pressure or stigma of not eating?
Um, you're asking me about that because there's just a little bit of lag about the stigma.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was just asking it. Sorry, there's a little bit of cut off, but
Yeah. No, I mean, of course there is, but I think I've at this point I plan my fasts, the longer fast, so hopefully it doesn't coincide with something like that. But yeah, I've been in these strange situations where everyone is eating, and you're kind of like, I'm just here, seeing you eat and smelling everything, and getting all these questions like, oh, aren't you hungry? Dangling something for you
yeah,
like that. Um, no, but we don't have to talk too much about it. But it's something I would think it would be I would think it would be so much fun to influence some guys a little bit with fasting, because it's not something. The nice way with fasting is just a tool in the toolbox. Like I don't do long fast for months at a time now. Like I did it a lot more when I just got into it and was like curious. But like the end of the line is pretty much that you don't lose muscle if you don't stop eating protein and training when you don't fast. And you can lose weight very, very quickly. So, if nothing else, what I think a lot of guys could do is start their cut with a longer fast, because it's kind of a head start to the cut, actually.
mm,
So, even if you're not going to do, I have these like structured routines with fasting, how to combine it with training and that. Even if you're not going to do something like that, just doing the one-off fast like that has value as well. So yeah, it was really fun to see Atlas Power Shrug get into that, and yeah, I would hope to see more guys try it.
yeah. Maybe I'll give it a shot sometime. I'll probably cut at some point
Mm,
because I've been bulking for a while,
yeah,
but yeah, I'm kind of curious as to how it would go. Yeah.
yeah. No, if you'd be curious, just hit me up. I'll tell you about it. So okay, we've gone for quite some time. I don't know how much time you have. There are many things I would have liked to get into that we're not going to have time to for, but just little short things here at the end. I just want to ask you because I've commented that on your stuff many times, like best arms in the game kind of thing. So tell us about the arm philosophy or approach specifically.
Yeah, so I would say probably more than almost any muscle group, apart from maybe the delts and back. The arms do benefit from a little bit of like beyond failure stuff or partials or intensity techniques. You could maybe argue for side delts or rear delts. You could do more beyond failure or do it harder or more volume. Usually the limiting factor is your elbows, realistically. So for most people, it's usually not a biceps or a triceps or a forearm or brachialis recovery issue. Usually it's running into tendonitis or some kind of overuse injury. It limits progress or limits the amount that you can train or how much you can progress. So I've had tendonitis. I've talked to a lot of common. It's one of those things where I do advocate maybe a little bit more control, especially on like really stretch focused movements where you're getting into a really lengthened position. Yeah, you do need to be aware that that's more stressful for the tendons. And so, yeah, just really easing into that stretch position, maybe adding in a pause, that kind of thing. And if you're doing overhead extensions, yeah, again, just pausing or being really intentional and slow on that eccentric. And it's one of those things where it's a very chronic issue. And if someone has never had it, they can maybe ignore most of this. It probably won't happen, but it might. And so, yeah, just being careful, being slow with the tricks, maybe adding in pauses, I think is a good idea. That being said, on easier, so like a push down, which is not as stretch focused, traction. So a spider curl, again, or contraction. You're lying on the bench and it's just at the top. It's most challenging as you curl the weight up and get in your hand. It's by far the most challenging up there. You can push those harder. You can do partials. You can add a little bit of oomph to it, that kind of thing, and drive it down and add more intensity. Just actually training them, because for a lot of people, they have the idea of, oh, I'll just do chin-ups for my biceps. I'll just do bench press for my triceps. You'll build some muscle doing that for sure. If you're a beginner, you'll probably get towards intermediate, but I don't think anyone is going to be maximizing their arm size with these big compounds. If you're doing them right, they are torso movements. So they're either the lats or the chest, and traps. The arms are kind of just along for the ride. And so you need specific training, especially what's intermediate. Some people might point to street lifters who get big arms doing nothing but dips and pull-ups. I think in most cases, they're either doing some isolation with rings, so maybe some pelican curls or extensions that way, or they have really, really good genetics, and they would probably still have bigger arms if they isolated them in a lot of cases. And so, yeah, most people are almost everyone is going to need to isolate. And I mean, I needed to isolate. It's not like I built big arms from these big compounds. So I think even if you're arm dominant, you need some kind of isolation work, at least occasionally. It depends how you want to set it up. I have 2 arm and shoulder days per week, which I have found to be quite effective. A lot of people won't want to specialize in arms that much for that long. They might have other goals, but for me, I like having big arms, and I just have kind of enjoyed training this way. So I haven't really changed much over the past 3 or 4 years. And so, yeah, I would say my main go-to movements for triceps would be push downs, overhead extensions. I take pretty much everything to failure. I don't really think 2 or 3 reps in reserve for arms makes a lot of sense. For curls, I would say incline dumbbell curls would be the big one. I've added in some preacher curls as well on that hip thrust machine. Hammer curls, I'm a big fan of. I saw Doug Miller doing 100-pound hammer curls. I'm not quite there yet. I think I'm like 30. Yeah, they were pretty cheated, but if you want to get big natural arms, you might as well look at some of the biggest guys out there. And so, yeah, heavy hammer curls, slightly cheated, beyond failure, going to where you can like you're either cheating or you're getting like partials where you're barely moving the weights. I found those to be very effective. And probably less exercise variation than a lot of people think. I've done probably 15 or 20 different curl variations, but I haven't found most of them worth keeping in. You know, occasionally I'll do barbell curls or reverse grip curls, spider curls. I mean, there's endless ways to curl, but I think once you find 2 to 3, maybe 4 variations, beyond that, it's probably not worth including like your 6th best variation or your 8th best variation. I mean, if your 10th best variation is finding its way into your program, why? Like, how is that? How did that little bastard slip in there? Like, what was going on? Maybe you're injured and you can't do some of your quote unquote better movements. I can see that, but I think most often you want your star players in the game. And finally, if a movement, maybe even a movement that I said was good, if it causes pain or if it just doesn't feel as good, you know, try something else, maybe come back to it later. There are movements that I didn't like when I first tried, and then I either got bigger or I learned something else or I moved in a slightly different way. And hey, now it feels pretty good. Or maybe someone described it in a way like, so you need to be moving this to this, or you move your shoulders this way, or you need to keep this tucked, or you need to keep your shoulders forward or something like that, or you need to let your shoulders hang down, or you know, some cue that changed the movement pretty dramatically. And so I train arms hard. I train them regularly. I've progressively overloaded over the course of 3 or 4 years, and I've had pretty good exercise selection and a technique that works for me. So I think a lot of people can get, not everyone obviously, but I think a lot of people can get 17 and a half, 18-inch arms if they specialize in it and if they, you know, eat enough and if it is a priority. You know, not everyone is going to get to 18 and a half, and very few people are going to get to 19, but I think most people can go further than they think.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm getting for myself is that I should up the frequency a bit for the arms, because to me, arms, it's a favorite body part in a sense. I think it's just good arms looks impressive. They show when you have a t-shirt, you know, and I think too, because I'm definitely not arm dominant. Like, I think the arms is what I feel like I've isolated the most, and still I would say like everything else on my upper body is ahead of that. But yeah, guys, I want you to look at Geoffrey's content and training in general, but the way you do the tricep stuff especially is like crazy to me sometimes. Intensity, but heavy too. And I would love to talk about exercises for all muscle groups, so I don't think we should spend too much time on that. But one thing that just comes to mind about numbers, like what are your 1 rep maxes on some big lifts?
On arm movements or other ones?
And I kind of want to come back to that. So I mean now, like the compound exercises, 1 rep maxes.
Oh man, 1 rep maxes. I haven't done 1 rep maxes in a while. For overhead press, the other day, actually maybe a couple of weeks ago, I did 80 kilos for 3. Which is, I mean, it's not amazing, but I was happy with that. And then I haven't done barbell bench press in a long, long time, but I did 50 kilos per hand for 4 and 40 kilos for, I'm almost at 15. I'm not quite there, but I should get 15 soon. And let's see, rowing movements. I usually use the 50 kilo dumbbells for chest supported rows and Helms rows, and usually like 10, 12 reps somewhere in there. So I'm pretty strong at dumbbells, like the movements that I actually do. Yeah. Let's see. But I mean, my 1 rep max barbell bench press is still 250 pounds from 5 5, 6 years ago. So I haven't really bothered to increase that. I'm sure I could with some kind of specialization phase, but I think that would be mostly to try to impress the internet and probably fail to impress the internet. Cause maybe I hit 315, but I don't think anyone would really be impressed with 315 for a bench. Like I would be happy with that. But I don't think it would really, I'm never going to be a world champion powerlifter. Let's put it that way. My best squat is 3 half plates. So 160 kilos, 350-ish pounds. So it's not amazing. Deadlift, I think it's still 205 kilos. So 450-ish pounds. So basically 250, 350, 450 pounds for bench, squat, deadlift. And I've built up enough muscle that I'm sure I could beat those. For RDLs, I did 3.5 plates for 10 and 3 plates for 18. So I'm better for reps. I tend to do more volume and higher number of sets, higher number of reps, and my body seems to respond better to that than low reps. For me, low reps, if I start doing low reps, I will get slightly better at low reps in a week or two, but then I'll just feel beaten up and I won't progress as well until I go back to higher reps. And then I'll feel like I'll fill out a little bit more and I'll make more progress. So for me, I tend to train for myself at this point, and it's more fun doing something you're good at anyway compared to, try powerlifting. And maybe I will eventually when muscle growth stagnates. I do have some powerlifting friends, and it does look somewhat intriguing and certainly impressive. Seeing someone squat 6 plates in person, stuff like that. It's like just a crazy amount of weight that I couldn't even unrack. And so it looks really cool in person, but I'm also not entirely sure if I'm built for it when it comes to the imbalances and the bracing and how to, keeping everything locked down. Because a lot of powerlifting is ability and the nervous system and being able to display that strength. And so, we'll see. Maybe eventually I'll decide to bench press more than 250, but it probably won't be for a while.
Yeah, no, because I already know a little bit of your strength, and I kind of just wanted you to talk about it to show people that even a guy like Geoffrey that's quite big isn't like the numbers aren't like crazy up there at all. That the point is that strength and hypertrophy are obviously related, but it's not like a completely linear that, the bigger guy is always stronger and that. And one thing I think is fun and interesting is take some of your more isolated exercises, like some arm exercises. And to me, that's where the numbers are like impressive, I don't know what you've done on these triceps extensions things, but I've seen you put like tons of dumbbells on the weight stack and stuff.
Yeah. I have to. Unfortunately, the stack is just not heavy enough. So I tend to, once you can do 20 reps and 25 reps and 30 reps, it's just not super productive. So I have to go up in weight. I guess I could probably do it one arm at a time, which would extend the progression a lot. I think there's something about having both arms and being able to sort of use your entire body and have momentum and overload that eccentric. Whereas with one arm, it's maybe not as stable, and you don't have that same amount of oomph that you can put into it. On those, I'm usually like 50 kilos, 55, somewhere around there. Although recently I've been doing them standing. So the standing ones, you're sort of forced into being a little bit stricter. But I have used the handle. Usually I would use the rope, but I'm using the V-bar recently, so it's more stable. So I think I've done like 40, 45 kilos for maybe 12 or 15 reps, somewhere on there. And so decently strong, but a lot of it comes from Yeah, I'm sure there are some people stronger than me on even on arm movements, but I think a lot of it is doing sufficient volume and really focusing on what I'm doing. I think on most of my arm movements, I could use more weight if
Mm-hmm.
I changed the technique. But on
Mm-hmm.
my incline dumbbell curls, I've done 60 per hand for five. Even on that 5 reps, I'm really controlling the eccentric
Mm-hmm.
and focusing on not messing myself up. Because once you get to a certain level of strength, like you have to be aware that the weights can bite back. And so I
Yeah.
tend to err a little bit on the side of control. I think this can go too far, but yeah, once you get fairly strong, you have to keep in mind that aspect of things. And so advanced programming, it's a little bit different from intermediate because you kind of have to work around these issues preemptively or if they've happened in the past. And so you have to
Mm-hmm.
be aware of like, maybe I could use more weight. Goes back to the bald Omni Man thing, where he
Mm-hmm.
could RDL 5 plates. He could
Mm-hmm.
probably RDL 6 plates if he really wanted to, I'm sure. He got
Mm-hmm.
fired up if he, maybe used a quicker tempo. He could probably RDL 6 plates.
Mm-hmm.
But is that going to be what is best for him in terms of fatigue, in terms of long term progression, in terms of
Mm-hmm.
stimulating muscle growth without negative potential downsides? Probably not. So it's the same thing with me with my arm training, where yes, I'm trying to simply overload, but sometimes I'm okay staying and trying to get more out of that weight
Yeah.
instead of focusing on progression. And then once I feel like, okay, I've gotten everything I can out of this weight, then I'll go up. So it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like this intentionally slower form of progression
Yeah. But that
that
is
I
that
think
that
is
is the
suitable for
point.
beginners, suitable for them.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
that's the progression mindset again, like, of course, the most obvious ways to
Yeah,
progress are adding reps or weight. But that's kind of what I try to tell people too, that as long as you have that mindset of, I need to be improving somehow. And so, especially when you're getting stronger like this, it's a very, very good idea to just spend some time and improve the quality of the same reps and weight, perhaps.
yeah. And it's something that doesn't show up in your training log.
Mm.
And this is where filming yourself could be useful.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not 100% needed though, because sometimes you can feel that a weight is getting easier and you have better control, and you don't really need to force it as much.
Mm. Yeah. No, this again, where I said earlier, because you brought him up again, Bald Omni Man, it's very much, I'm in between you guys because I am slightly stronger than you on the bench and so on, but it's still not like, I'm nowhere close to him or Alex Leonidas. And to me, it's kind of like I have a sort of power building approach that I like to get better at these movements, like a bench press and a squat, and that like I will prioritize that a bit over choosing, like, especially legs. I know that I could build bigger legs if I did more leg presses and stuff, but I want to have a nice looking squat. That's part of my goals. But so to me, it's more about improving the working weight I can use with nice form over just pushing the heaviest 1 rep max I possibly could. And something I was thinking about when we were talking about this a
Yeah.
little earlier, you talked a bit about genetics for this. I wonder too if it's just also a result of the training. Like when I think about it sometimes, the way I've trained is like, okay, I don't train geared towards like powerlifting, 1 rep maxes, but I try to get stronger and I like to use these compounds and I do high intensity and like you, decent amount of volume still. And what I feel like I built, my capacity is like, yeah, I am really quite strong, but especially I just keep going and doing all these things in a workout and not running out of steam, kind of. So I feel like it's like the muscle mass. It's not just related to a 1 rep max kind of strength, but it's like toughness. Like, yeah, I can move a lot of weight, but it doesn't even affect me that much. I can keep going. I can do a lot of it. So I wonder if it's that too, that you built a certain like body type that even if some look similar, like you have muscle mass, still the way you got that muscle mass is different. So what you're good and worse at varies.
Yeah, I think there's something to having that work capacity and being able to do more than just one set of a movement. I think high intensity training can work for some people, but then the majority of their physique through HIIT, they built it through doing multiple sets of an exercise. Sometimes 2 sets, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, sometimes a few people even a little bit more than that. I tend to do like 3 to 4, sometimes 5 to 6 sets on a movement, but rarely. Usually 2 to 4, somewhere in there. But I think, yeah, there is something to be said about that work capacity and not just, it's not just a level of performance. It's not just, oh, if I hit these numbers, I'll look this way. Yeah, it's how you get there. It's how you, it's your technique, it's that connection, it's the volume, it's training close failure. It's all these things and not just move this much weight for this many reps.
100%. So I could definitely keep on going. I have many things on a paper here, but we've gone over 3 hours. Maybe it's time to round it off. Yeah, we can always do this again. No, I think this was great. I'll tell my guys that Geoffrey is one of the few people that I actually want to like follow and listen to the content. I love your Instagram stories. I've done the same kind of thing before, that I talk to the camera more like that. And I think, just what I think a lot talking to you is, you're just a guy with his own, you're thinking for yourself, like you're open-minded, you're listening to things, but you have your school of thought with things. And you clearly have the results to show for it. And to me, that's just like, that's the real deal. That's someone I want to listen to. And yeah, you're one of the one handful of guys that I would like tell people to go for further studies. So yeah, a bit of credit to you for that. And yeah, guys, follow Geoffrey. Please tell us where we can find you.
So it's just Geoffrey Verity Schofield on YouTube and Instagram. And then Verity Fit for my books, if someone wants to peruse those.
Oh yeah, I have not read your book, but I'm sure it's a good one. So guys, if you need a little handbook for your training, go check out Geoffrey's book. But okay, I guess that's it. Thank you for joining me for the first episode. It's big for me. It was great talking to you, and yeah, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.